Good.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's not bad.
So for
Mr. Chairman.
Welcome to the meeting of your Wyoming State Shooting Complex Task Force. Whoa, little feedback there. I think most of you have probably heard by now that we do not have a presentation this morning at 8:30. That's why we're starting a little bit late. And we're going to use this time that we have available to us this morning for a vigorous discussion among the committee on our task force. Among the task force on some of our logistical work and plans for moving forward. So with that, Mr. Co-Chairman, any opening comments?
Yeah, Chairman. So just a little bit of a purview for today, as I think as the co-chairman has indicated. So the city of Cheyenne withdrew their proposal. So we've still got 3 proposals that for consideration. Just to go through the agenda, if you don't have one of those, so the first one is scheduled today at 10:30, which would be Central Wyoming. Then we'll do a lunch break. And then we'll come back and then we've got a proposal at 1:15 from Campbell County. And then 3:15, Park County will present. We've scheduled up to 2 hours if the presenters need that full 2 hours. So then we'll adjourn. We might have some discussion. The format for those will be is to allow the proponents to come up and do a presentation. What I'd like to do is if there's questions at any time by any of the task force members, we will stop the proponents and you'll have an opportunity to ask those questions. But I'd like this to be as much as a dialogue as just a presentation, and then wait for an hour and a half and then ask questions on something that was presented an hour earlier. So as we walk through these, so I would say have your questions ready. You know, one of the things that we decided as a task force at this point in time was to try to emphasize, not to say that there's not a number of questions that can be asked. Anything on any of the proposals that's submitted is eligible to ask questions, and anything that's added by the presentation. But, you know, we want to kind of focus on both the business plan and the site potential and overall governance and operation and then financing of the facility. So just this, so that'll be today. And then tomorrow we're going to bring those 3 entities back. We're scheduled tomorrow. We've actually adjusted that a little bit. Campbell County has asked to be moved up in the agenda. So Campbell County will be number 1 at 10 o'clock. And then we'll do Central Wyoming at 10:30. And then Park County will be at 11:30, and then we'll break. And then after the break, we'll get together and make some decisions on the selection committee as to what we want to move forward for site visits. And so initially we've indicated that there would be 2 that were selected for site visits to be moved forward. I think that's currently the plan, but certainly we can discuss whether we want to do that after all the presentations, whether there's a desire to do something other than just do 2. that's something we can have a discussion on after we get done with two presentations of the proponents tomorrow. So, once we do that, hopefully by the end of tomorrow, we will identify where we're gonna go do site visits. So one of the things that we can discuss right now this morning, Mr. Co-Chair, that I'd like to get disposed of while we've got time, is we sent out an email last Friday, I believe, requesting some potential times. We actually reserved that week of July 15th through the 19th to do site visits. And so there was, if we do two, it's feasible to do two in 2 days. Maybe, I took the longest travel distances from the two furthest proponents. It's about a 4-hour drive, so it's feasible to do 4 to 6 hours of site visit, presentation, travel, and then do the next one the next day. And so what I'd like to do, I think what I have got back from the people that responded to the email, the 18th was not available, is that correct? So that day was out. I didn't get anything else from anybody that says they were not available. So that Monday, Tuesday, I know Representative Altman said that would work best for her, which is the 15th and 16th. Any discussion on what days work to do the site visits?
Apparently, there's a shortage of coffee this morning. People are not very talkative. Apparently, these are pretty sensitive microphones. Is that what I'm sensing here? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Goldman.
I think that the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would work. I mean, speaking for myself, but you want to try to knock them out, whether it's 2 over 2 days or a third, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Does that work for everybody? We'll know by the end of tomorrow whether we need that. Tomorrow, decision is what we want to move forward for site visits. We'll look at actually scheduling where that's going to be, which days, which sites first, Monday, Tuesday. We'll get to pencil those times in. By the time this gets to the legislative session, we have to have that governance structure nailed down. I don't know that we'd have to have everything, signed contract type of situation prior to that, but at least we need to have an agreement with the proponents is exactly how this facility is going to operate, who's going to do the operation, maintenance, day-to-day work, and that stuff going forward. So we have a clear picture of what that's going to look like. So we're at the 15th, 16th. We've done our site visits. We've narrowed it down now to the facility and the proponent that we're tentatively going to make the award to. The question I have for the task force. Do you guys want to do that at the end of the second site visit and get together then, or wherever that site visit's at, and have a discussion as to who we want to make the work. Now, according to the RFP that we put out, we've got a few days where we actually have to notify them of that. Or the other alternative would be leave, think about it for a day or two and come back, and we could do that through an online meeting and make that discussion then as to where we wanted to make the final recommendation back to the legislature and the governor's office of where that location would be. So this is a discussion item. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay,
I would like some time afterwards, because I think we might have some questions after the site visit where we might want to negotiate a little bit before we make an offer. If we come back and go, okay, they were really close on this, but maybe a governance question or something that we're just not quite sure of, before we say, all right, you're getting it, and then we're not happy with the final result after we go back and forth a little bit. I think it might be good to reserve a little time for ourselves to have some discussion and not try and cram it in at the end of a visit.
Don't you?
thank you. I think there's value in having a pause. But the last time we got a report, we've gone through our budget pretty well, and that sparing a second meeting day might have some cost advantages. I just ask the task force to keep that in mind. Not that we couldn't probably afford to have a half-day Zoom meeting or something to pin it down, but it would be financially less expensive to the task force budget if we were to make that decision when we're all together at the end of the second site visit. But I'm open to other discussions. Committee? Karen?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention two things for you. According to the RFP that you put out, you have proposers have 1 week after the site visit. If there were any questions that were raised in the site visit, they have a week to provide you with the answers to those. So that might weigh into your consideration of whether or not you make the decision then, or you wait a week for any supplemental information to come in. I don't know how you want to handle that. As far as the budget is concerned, if you choose to meet in person or online, the budget is sufficient for that. If you'll recall in what I sent you, I think you have half a dozen more days. If you're only going to do 2 days of site visits, that definitely leaves you an opportunity to meet in person, if you so chose. The last thing I wanted to mention is on or about August 13th is when the final selection was going to be made in an open online meeting. So I don't know if you want to have a meeting in the interim informally amongst yourselves to discuss it, but I know that the final selection is going to be an online public meeting. And we've got it scheduled on or about the 13th, but that's certainly up to the chairman if you want to do that then, or if another time would be more conducive for that discussion.
Thank you, Karen. Mr. Co-Chair.
So do we want to try to pick a date? I agree with Kate on that. I think it's better to take a few days and we may have an online meeting to discuss if there's details that we're okay with most of the proposal prior to the award, but there's some unresolved issues that we may want to get resolved back to. We need to have that fleshed out well before we get to the legislature. So go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we were to do the site visits on the 15th and 16th, could we look at that following week of potentially the 24th, still allow that week for follow-up to be able to make the final designation at that time? I don't know that there's any gain to waiting until August 13th. And Karen, I think the way the RFP reads is that no later than, correct?
Karen?
Mr. Chairman, it reads no later than 7 days after the site visit. So on the 15th, that would be the 22nd, and obviously moving forward. If you went all the way through Wednesday, then that would be the 24th.
Great. All Senator?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'm going to be out of town during that week of the 15th, 16th for the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Just to make everybody aware of that. So I won't be able to attend if it's anything to do with those dates. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Well, that's disappointing. I was really hoping to have the whole task force do the site visits.
And ideal, but everybody's schedule, if we're only missing one, I think that's much better than I expected, but would like to have you. So what we're faced with is we have to have final decision out by August 13th or sooner. That's kind of the drop dead date based on the RFP that we'd put out. So I'm looking at my calendar, and I don't know if everybody else has theirs, but the follow-up meeting after the site visit, the second one would be the 16th with the alternative of the 17th. And so what's the possibility of looking at that 7 days after the site visit would be that 23rd, 24th, or 25th of August?
August or July?
Or July, excuse me. Does anybody have a preference of the Tuesday, the 23rd, Wednesday, the 24th, or Thursday, the 25th? And I'm assuming that we can do this online.
Mr. Chairman, the 23rd would actually work better in my schedule if that's possible. The 24th and 25th, I have some other clients coming in to town, so it'll make it a little trickier. But if it has to be those days, I can make it work.
Yeah, anybody else?
Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm tied up the 23rd, but 22nd works.
22nd works.
22nd work for everybody?
Does that work for you, James?
All right, let's shoot an online meeting, Karen, for the 22nd for a discussion, and it will be a public meeting online that people can get in. But at that point in time, it will be a determination. It'll be our final recommendation back to the legislature and the governor's office on that. So what I'd like to do, Karen, is probably set that up for timing. It's Monday morning, 10 a.m. So hopefully 10 to 2 or 10 to noon. I think we can wrap that up in 2 hours, if not quicker. So let's list that as 10 to 2 on Monday, August or July 22nd. That we'll have an online task force meeting.
Into noon.
10 to noon.
Karen, you have that? Discussion, anything? Senator, your mic's still on. Aaron.
Mr. Co-Chairman, to clarify, so I understand, we're going to vote in that meeting and determine, or we're going to announce?
Mr. Co-Chairman.
So the way we currently have that structured is that we would do the site visits. And so this would be our first formal meeting after the site visits to make the discussion. And then I'm anticipating, unless the task force feels differently, that we would actually vote at that point in time. And I think we owe it to all those proponents to particularly at this point in time as to why we picked one over another. And provide that rationale. I think that's just good public business. Provides transparency as to what we collectively thought. You know, hopefully we get as close to a unanimous decision as possible. And so, but yeah, my anticipation, unless I hear different, is we will actually discuss. Somebody will put forth a motion as to who they recommend, and then we'll discuss the pros and cons of the last two. And at the end of business, we'll vote on who we collectively as the task force, that vote will be recorded. Who we want to recommend back to the legislature and the governor's office. So is everybody comfortable with that format? So, all right. So that's the plan. We got the 15th, 16 with an alternative of the 17th blocked out for site visits. And then that next Monday on the 22nd from 10 to 12, we'll do an online and make a final decision and then move forward with a recommendation after that. So, Mr. Co-Chair, what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the process after we make that decision on July 22nd. So.
If
your-
we
your
could, before
thoughts?
we move on to that, let's have some discussion on this governance structure. And that's related to what takes place after we make the selection. But I think you did allude to the fact that we've got some variety in the proposed governance structures that the different entities have identified. But I think we're going to want to have some discussion about that, about which one ultimately prevails and whether there's some give and take and some of that discussion on the governance structure. Because I think that's a critical piece because it's got huge budgetary impact potential, whether we're adding state personnel or it's going to be managed by local people or, you know, whatever. So, I just throw that out for the task force, some comments on governance structure and how you would like to engage with the various entities, the finalists about their proposed governance structure, whether we're comfortable with their proposed governance structure or whether we might want to have some opportunity to negotiate compromise there. So open that up for discussion. Cade?
Mr. Chairman, I would like them to have their opportunity to try and sell us on their governance structure over the next 2 days. I think this gives us an opportunity to hear why they came up with that idea, shoot holes in it as part of our discussion if there's anything we're uncomfortable with. But I'd hate for us to kind of pre-discuss and say, you know, anyone asking for state funds is in trouble, and then they've got to revamp their proposal here in the next couple hours. I think, you know, that's why we're here, is to maybe give them their opportunity to justify their rationale or, you know, question them and see how flexible they are on some of those things that we might be less comfortable with.
Representative Boughton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I'm in agreement with that because there's different governing entities. And I am not an expert on all of those. So whether it be a city, a town, or some other thing, I would like to hear their proposals, to hear what they've come up with, because it could well be something that I had not considered. So I would like to do that. I think it's a good idea.
I wasn't suggesting that we would shut down a discussion from the proposals today about governance structure, but I do think there's a likelihood that there may be a need for some give and take in that regard. Further discussion. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I think the governance structure is going to be critical on the long-term success of this facility. I've been involved with a lot of governance structures that failed, and we got a lot of examples of that. But I think it's critical that we figure out a way to move forward. And I kind of am leaning towards the idea that if we have people appointed to some sort of joint powers board, that we have an agreement in place that would allow, frankly, a proposal, which I willing to discuss this, but Senate confirmation of those said people, just to make sure that we have policies and procedures that reflect the state of Wyoming's goals, because it is going to be a joint venture. I think it deserves a lot of discussion, a lot of thought, just as much as the facility location does, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair. Thank you.
Further discussion. Very good. So let's talk about, Mr. Co-Chairman, the processes that we will need to think about for after a site is selected. How much work does that then open up?
So there's, at that point in time, I guess the way I see this, it's kind of a two-pronged process moving forward. So once we make a recommendation, that local sponsoring entity knows that's a recommendation that's going to go back to the legislature and the governor. So I think there's a realistic expectation that they can start moving forward with some of the planning components, maybe the governance structure, nailing down exactly who, you know, the bylaws and some of that stuff, preliminary surveying of the site, looking for local sponsors, lining up contractors. So there is a lot of things that can happen once we make that award. Now, keep in mind the process, once we as a committee make it's a recommendation from the task force. That recommendation would then go to two legislative committees. One is the Travel, Recreation and Wildlife Committee, and it would go before that committee to make that we're going to recommend that the facility is located here. These are the rationales. It also has to go to the Joint Appropriations Committee. Those will be two separate meetings. One, I believe TRW's meeting is the last week of October, first week of November. Appropriations Committee starts looking at this stuff usually in December. And that's when we would do the presentation there. They will incorporate this. The money's already appropriated. It's just a matter of making the award and get the structure of how we want to make that award going forward. A lot of that will revolve around that governance structure. So there'll be two legislative meetings that has to go to. My preference would be to have non-legislative members of this task force come and present before those two committees. You got to understand those committees have no idea what we've done for over the last year and a half by the time we get there. And so what we would want to do is probably have three non-legislative members of the committee come to present to those two committees and say, you know, this is where we started. This is the first meeting. This is what we decided then as far as how we're going to rank these proposals, what an RFP, start putting the RFP process together, solicited the RFPs, and just walk those committees through that whole process. The reason that's extremely important is because when this gets to the floor in the House and the Senate, there's going to be a lot of questions as why was it'll come back to why was their community selected over my community in my area because they submitted a proposal. The more members that hear this from those legislative committees, it's just not two House members and two Senate members trying to carry this proposal. You've got that entire House and Senate Travel Recreation Committee. You've got the Appropriations Committee that's had all these questions, had time to go into detailed discussions with the task force members about why we ended up where we're there. So what I'd like to do is we don't need a decision today or even tomorrow, but think about, and if there's 4 people that want to come, the more the merrier. It just really needs to be non-legislative members before those committees. Ideally, it would be some of the private sector, other sportsman interest type, and maybe 1 or 2 of the agencies that are going to be directly involved with this facility or activities associated with the facility. So there's no limited number. What you really want to know is show that this was a very broad and diverse group, and these recommendations were looked at, and then the outcome. And so think about looking at those schedules. We'll get the date of those TRW committees and the appropriations committees out there to look at. So that's the legislative side of it. So that'll be the next activity for the task force, unless there's additional stuff that we need to work on. So we envisioned it all along that once this award was made, until the ribbon cutting ceremony's done, there's going to be a role for this task force to play. And so one of the things looking at the budget already, you know, we've indicated all along that the state would provide some assistance and direction associated with the actual design and the layout. And one of the things that me and the co-chair have talked about and with the governor's office is we would actually like to be able to bring in some experts to help. You know, some communities may have already done that or planning to do that on their own. But certainly we want as much input as the actual layout, once we've selected that site, as possible to make sure that we get enough input. Working with Ron and the Business Council last year, we had contemplated going to the SHOT Show in Las Vegas. I think that's still something that we'll do. We may host a breakfast or a luncheon for many of those potential sponsors or those sponsors that do a lot of these national events, and just let them know, but that this is out and going, and actually maybe use those as some of the experts to come out and help do this. So when that starts to materialize after the session, keep in mind, this will go in March. The governor will finally sign the budget bill. That's when it's the real deal. The money's been in an account for that community. This process is moving forward at that point in time. What I had anticipated that we may ask for additional funds for the task force to continue to meet. I would like to get the task force together with a number of these experts on that final site and go out and do walkthrough with a number of these experts and those local communities and make sure that what's happening is what we envisioned all along. And it's not just the layout. I think could continue. I think we all recognize the leadership, business plan, those things. It's a continued opportunity to again now say, show us now that you've been awarded. You know, who is on your governing and how are you going to do this now that it's not a paper exercise? Who's the real person? And who's going to be in that role? So I anticipate that sometime probably in late April, 1st of May, we'll be back out on that site with that local entity and hopefully a number of these experts if we can get them out there. And there's a reason to do that. And the reason to do that is to try to develop ownership from some of these large national events. If they're invited early in the process to come and say, tell us what you guys see, what will you need to help facilitate your matches here in Wyoming at this state shooting complex. And so we start to develop some ownership from some of these national sponsors in this complex. Again, it's a state complex. And so that we would be meeting again sometime at that point in time on the ground with those local sponsors, check progress. And so that would be the next step. And then hopefully we're breaking ground sometime in late summer, mid to late summer. And if the community has done their due diligence, they can literally start planning after July 22nd. And so it'll be a good chance to do a progress update.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Go ahead.
So I'm trying to think forward into this appearance before the Joint Appropriations Committee. If the governance structure is going to be such that there will be state personnel required for the operation of this facility, does that have to be part of the JAC presentation budgetarily? Or does that come in the supplemental a year down the road? What's your thoughts on it?
So keep in mind, this we could put an effective immediately date on that, which is going to be at the signature of the governor. So there's a couple of ways to do that. You could actually do that as a bill. What I would anticipate, let's assume that there's a proposal and it's going to require X employees from one or two agencies. If there's an agreement by the task force and that agency, they can put that in their supplemental budget request and ask for that, and it becomes part of the agency budget. And if they're going to be agency employees, that's really the best way to do that. And then it's an ongoing expense of the agency. So I would prefer that if we decide that there's going to be X number of state government employees, that's the way we would approach that with the Appropriations Committee. It would have to be concurrence with the agency director that they were willing to go before the appropriations. Now, keep in mind, certain agencies are off the general fund and do not need the legislative approval to put employees on or off. It's within their own budgetary constraints. Game and Fish Department. State Parks is a whole different animal. They would have to go and ask for those two employees and they'd have to be granted, or 3 or 4 or 6 or 10 or X number of seasonals. That would have to go into the agency's budget. And the best way to do that would just do an exception request by the agency to the appropriation to add those FTEs or those part-time employees to their budget. So does that answer your question?
It does. Further discussion on moving forward. Anybody? So, Mr. Co-Chairman, when we make our recommendation to the governor, if the governor were to disagree with our recommendation, would his only action be to veto the legislation? Or might he intervene prior to that?
Well, Mr. Co-Chair, I'm not in a position to prognosticate of what the governor may or may not do on any particular piece of legislation. He does have line item veto. And he could just go in there with his little red pen and line out 3 words. And so I'd say, given the fact that the majority of this task force was appointed by the governor, it's highly unlikely if we get to a near consensus support for a single location that the governor is going to veto it. Seeing as how it's mostly his task force. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
So let's go back, you said, once we make our selection and we give our recommendation to the legislature, even though that's not final at that point, the communities would likely move forward with planning further work on the governance structure, site survey, those sorts of things, identifying potential contractors. If any of that has a price tag attached to it, the local entity is going to be on the hook for that, right? Because it's not been finalized. That's your understanding? Okay, further things the task force would like to discuss this morning while we have some time. Josh.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair, just to follow up to Senator Hicks, in regards to some in-person testimony and being able to attend, I'm sure Karen will be able to pull those meetings. I do believe that TRW is scheduled for September 30th and October 1st, which is a significant conflict for me for obvious reasons. But I'm curious if your thoughts are on the significance of being there during the session is actually more important than during these committee meetings.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
So just the talk through the process. So the committee meetings, normally we would, if they're required legislation, it would be essential that we had to be there at their last meeting. This is not necessarily, it's a budgetary item. Even if we go the route, if there's state employees, if they wanted to put that as an exception request based on a recommendation from the task force, that the agency would add 2 FTEs. It is critically important because this is election year. And what happens is the committee that if we present to, say we went to TRW in October and we presented to the committee, election cycle, every 2 years, those committees turn over. There's usually a few members that stay on, but you could be in front of a committee during the legislative session that's almost entirely different people as to what you went and visited with in October. So a good point there, Josh. It's probably just as important, if not more important, to make sure that when this comes up for presentation to those committees, that we be there during the session, that any of the task force members that are available that can come to Cheyenne and support this. And at that point in time, unless there's an actual bill out there, and I don't anticipate it at this point in time, it would just be the Joint Appropriations Committee as part of the budget process. Which
Josh,
just for you guys, don't fear the Appropriations Committee. Everybody else does in the legislature, but you guys don't have to.
I would add, Josh, if you wanted to submit written comments to that TRW meeting, that if you had something else to do that day, you could certainly submit a written.
But so back to the legislation that authorized the creation of task force says we will report to them. So we are going, if that's their last meeting, we're going to have to go provide a report. Somebody is going to have to, Mr. Co-Chair, that deer permit that I drew that opens October 1st is, I think that's Mr. Corsi's problem too. That's a great problem to have.
Who's the chairman of that committee that stuck to that date for their last meeting?
Yeah, who's not hunting that day?
That'd be Representative Store.
Okay, we'll find someone to make sure that we have someone there to present the report.
Yeah.
All right. Further discussion. Mr. Glenn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd love to beat the governance dead horse a little bit more. I'm struggling in my head to figure out the timing of when we talk governance. I know we'll talk some today. And, you know, if a group is flexible, that's great. But if we determine the site after the site visits, and then we go out and negotiate a governance structure and they balk and say, no, we're not willing to play, we're in a bind. So I'm trying to figure out in my head when we do that negotiation, and my head tells me that happens after we do the site visits and we have the conversation with both of the two sites that we visit with before we make the selection. But I just kind of wanted to have that conversation so I can get that timing in my head.
I think that would be my idea, Mr. Co-Chairman, your thought?
So I think when we get done tomorrow, we're gonna narrow it down to two, so you're gonna have two alternative proposals on the governance structure. And quite frankly, the reason we're bringing them back for the second day is that can be part of the discussion tomorrow with the half hours, is that if we have some concerns with the potential governance structure. But we're scheduled now for that 22nd meeting to make the final decision. At that point in time, I would hope that this group would come to at least a framework of what's an acceptable governance structure. And that should be part of the discussion as prior to that award. And so I would hope tomorrow we can have part of those discussions with those proponents.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
in my mind, I've kind of seen the site visit as one of our opportunities to actually have some of these detailed negotiations. One of the reasons we talked at our last meeting about doing a full day is so we can be out on the site with, you know, actually walking the land and getting a vision there, and then going back and spending 3 or 4 hours really going through with a fine-tooth comb what it means to have this in their community. And that's got to be governance structure as much as anything else. And so to me, that's when some of the heavy negotiations are going on, to see how flexible they are, what their opportunities are, what we really think about what they're proposing, so that we can make that decision the next week. Because when we make the decision, at that point, our negotiating factor goes way out the window. But when we're sitting there on their site saying, what about A, B, and C? That's when we have the most leverage to talk to them.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I think what I'm wanting to hear is, are they amenable to being flexible in their management structure? I think that's really key, because I think it's if anything, I guess I'd characterize it as a joint negotiation about just how it's going to end up. So I look forward to hearing flexibility. I think we can work through anything as long as people are flexible. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Senator, would you talk a little bit about okay, one moment. Senator, while we're on your point, you mentioned senatorial confirmation of the Joint Powers Board, the governance structure or something. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you're envisioning there?
Certainly, Mr. Co-Chair. What I'm envisioning is when we get a governance structure down, that the legislative body has some sort of say-so in the direction of what that group does. I think many times things run off the rails. Star Plunge might be a great example of this. There's many things that haven't really worked out the way we hoped. And I think we have to, basically have a connection to that group to I guess, have legislative intent, is to make sure things are on track. I think the more you let things go in governance, I was a county commissioner for 8 years, and I can assure you I have many disasters in joint powers boards because of the disconnection between the intent of the people that appointed those people to those boards, say originally, and what's going on, they say currently. There just gets to be a disconnect. So I think it behooves, at least in my mind, that we keep this group together with the legislators. So, because we're going to have to work together in the future. There's going to be ongoing funding. There's going to be justifications for the ongoing funding. And I think the connection is important. And I don't mean that you micromanage anybody. I don't mean that, but I mean you have to have a connection. I just think it keeps everybody in the world of reality. And I think the outcome is a better outcome long-term. And that's kind of a broad way I'm looking at it, Mr. Co-Chair. any specific questions, I guess I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Back to Representative Ottman, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that, and I think this is a good time to bring it up, that my understanding of the expectations was also where they're going to be in 5 years, that in fact that this facility was capable of expanding to those world-class activities. And so that so if it isn't, that would be a grave consideration, because that's what's going to make it different, a world-class different from just a really good place. So am I on the right track with that?
I think you are, you know, the 5-year plan or build out, you know, and that's where that ongoing funding that Senator mentioned, I think is likely to play into this. And so the quality of the relationship between the state of Wyoming, the legislature, and the management team at the site will be critical for that ongoing funding. If there's a lot of contention and angst and stress, you know, it makes getting further appropriations all the more difficult than my experience. Mr. Co-Chairman?
Yeah, and I just think we've got the cart so far on the horse right now that, because there is very divergent views from the three proposals. Is one of them was anywhere from 100% locally, no state involvement whatsoever. So I think we're actually maybe prejudicing some of the proposals by having this discussion at this point in time. I think they're all valid points, but I would strongly suggest that we listen to the proposals and then see what may be the options out there versus, you know, and I don't disagree with anything that was said, but I think we're prejudicing some of the proposals out here that haven't contemplated some of the ideas that we've talked about here as far as ongoing state funding and, you know, long-term build out. And so, Mr. Co-Chair, I would just suggest that at this point in time that we just table this discussion until probably tomorrow at some time when we're all a lot more educated on what proposals actually are out there.
Motion table is always in order. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. Matter's been tabled. Anything further for the task force in the time we have remaining? Mr. Co-Chairman.
So, just one thought, Mr. Chairman.
Now you have a comment.
Yeah, I do have a comment. Yeah, got to get that last word in. You know, it was interesting. I had dinner with a number of you last night, and we were jokingly how this has been an evolutionary process through the beginning, and there was really no template from where we started. And you know, it had the appearance of sometimes looking a little disorganized. Not to say that that was intentional, but that was to derive the best product with the most input and try to get to someplace. And it still kind of feels a little bit like that going forward. And I want to thank the members of the task force and the members of the public that have put things in, but this is an evolutionary process. There's no template out there that I'm aware of. And in my 14 or 15 years in the legislature that have started with just a concept, you know, ground zero and tried to build something out that's really indicative of the state of Wyoming. So hang with us, ladies and gentlemen. It's an evolutionary process, and so far I'm very happy with where we're at today. So anyway.
Just to follow up on that, I do believe that the lack of rigidity in our RFP and the way we worked our way forward did allow the communities the flexibility to come up with all sorts of innovative approaches to how this thing might work in their community. And we're going to hear more about that today as we hear the final three proposals. So as frustrating as it has been, you know, we had some of that discussion about, you know, well, maybe we should have, could have, would have, you know, we hindsight and look back at the process. I think it's worked, not perfectly, but I think it's worked overall to allow us to get to this point. And I think we'll, continue building this plane while we fly it across the country. So with that, we'll stand at ease until 10:25. How's that? Very good.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair,
John.
I'm curious, I didn't see the communications for Cheyenne not being able to be here today and why they've pulled out of this process. I'm curious if there's any more information that could elaborate on how that decision was made or what was the motivator for that?
Mr. Co-Chairman.
So Karen did send out an email, I'm assuming the whole task force, and it was, I believe, the day after. Maybe it didn't go through. So apparently Karen, it didn't get out to everybody, but anyway, so that may be a technology issue. The only thing that, and Karen, if I misstate this, please jump in and help me, but my recollection of the letter from the mayor was this just was not a good time for the city of Cheyenne to pursue this activity right now. And I do know there is a lot going on in Laramie County right now that directly or indirectly impacts the city. But that's the only explanation that we got, was it's just not a very good time for the city of Cheyenne to move forward with this proposal on their land.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Hicks is absolutely correct. What I got from the city, and I'll just give you an expert, it says, while we know that Cheyenne would be an excellent host for the state shooting complex, we believe this is not the right time for us to take on this project. Mayor Collins does want to pass along the willingness to provide any assistance they can to the community that is selected. And they thanked for the opportunity, and they stand ready to provide any assistance that any of the other communities that end up being selected would ask of them. But as far as any specific details on the why, I don't have them.
All right, we'll stand at ease till 10:25.
Well, just saying. Take him up on it.
All right, everyone, we're about ready to get started. We're uploading a video file, so be just a minute. We might be a little bit late rolling in at 10:25. All right, Karen, are we Zooming or YouTubing or whatever we're doing here? Casper, are you ready?
Yes, we're ready
Central
whenever
Wyoming?
they are.
All right, call us back to order, please. During the break, I was just starting to feel like a little kid on the last day of school, when you know that there's all sorts of opportunities just awaiting the ringing of a bell. And we're about to ring that bell. And I'm just really delighted that folks are here. The process will be the presentations will be made, and we will interrupt as necessary for the task force members to ask questions at that moment. So please don't let that fluster you, but rather than waiting until the end of your presentation to ask you about something you said in 45 minutes ago, we thought we'd just raise our hands and we'll interrupt as necessary to ask questions and give you a chance to respond during the presentations. When we're done, we will accept some public comment at the end of the presentations. But we do have some time constraints. And so we ask anyone who's offering public comment to stay on point, be brief, try not to be redundant. If somebody's already said what you want to say, we've already heard that. So we'll just try to be efficient with our time this morning. Mr. Co-Chairman, anything before we get rolling and ring the bell?
No, just standard protocol. Let's just identify yourself, any additional facilities other than the committee and the proposal that you're working on that you may have. You always address the chair if there's questions. And so just normal, what we would call legislative protocol for public meetings. So please identify yourself, any affiliations, address the chair, and then the committee members will do the same to ask questions. So with that, Mr. Chairman, shoot away.
Well said. Central Wyoming, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. While our main presenter, Ms. Lopez, is taking care of all the technology, I'll start with the introductions. First of all, thank you so much for allowing us to present to you today. It is a thrill and an honor to be here. My name is Darren Devine. I am, I recently joined the ranks of unemployment. I was the former president of Casper College. I'm also a competitive shooter. I am primarily a pistol and 3-gun shooter. I'm a member of USPSA. I'm a chief range officer. I've been accepted into the Range Master program, so I'll sit for my boards this year at the National PCC to hopefully, as long as I get everything done, pass my certification to become a USPSA Range Master. So I do have quite a bit of background in the competitive shooting sports, since I do work a lot of matches. I do travel around the country quite a bit, or at least the region quite a bit, and go to a lot of ranges. So hopefully I can add some details and some background to that. So at this point, I think we have the technology not quite there. All right, as Lima works on that. We spent a lot of time. Our committee has been meeting since late last year on this. And so we have put a lot of time and effort. We have tried very hard in today's presentation to not duplicate things that you have seen in the tome, the small forest that we cut down to produce that report for you. So we'll try very hard not to be repetitive so that you won't see the same information. We will try very hard to show you why, or illustrate why we believe Central Wyoming is a very viable location for a successful shooting range, for the state shooting range. I thought about making a comment talking about our superior technology, but that might be taken off the list this morning. So
Technology is a wonderful thing when it works.
on a note, let me actually talk about that just briefly. This is a point in a slide, and I can make it now and save some time later. One of the things that our site does have is internet connectivity. We have fiber optic actually to the site. That becomes pretty important, or at least in my world. As fate would have it, just this weekend, USPSA sent out a new ruling that, we have different levels of matches. And I won't bore you with all that, but let's just say that at the area level and at the national level, once you get to those matches, heretofore, all tournaments have had to have paper backups. You know, it's a pretty serious thing. We want to make sure that mistakes aren't made. And so not only do we have our electronic scoring, which is done on tablets, but we also have a paper backup in case anything goes wrong. Well, just this past weekend, USPSA made a ruling that as long as you can download your scores every 6 or so squads, you no longer have to do paper scoring. So the advent and the availability of technology, especially Wi-Fi, is critical and becoming more critical as time goes on. You know, as the shooting sports change, just like everything else in the world, become more technological. You know, we do feel that is a necessity, and that is something that this site does offer. So that's one of the benefits that we're happy to be able to bring to the table.
Well, for some reason, it does not like our presentation in actual presentation mode. So we will pivot here a little bit and
There we go.
Could we perhaps email that to Karen and share it with the committee or something? I don't know.
well, I can display it. We'll just have to change your sharing.
Question, Senator Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just on the internet connectivity,
Yes, sir.
what are you actually talking about? Fiber, what speed and where? Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
You
Mr.
bet.
Devine?
Mr. Chair, Senator Kolb, it is fiber. I do not know the speed right off the top of my head. We will get that information for you, but it is fiber optic. Actually, it's just been installed in the last, if I remember right, several months, but we will get that speed for you, sir.
Want to introduce yourself and then start your presentation?
Okay. Sorry about that technology difficulty. And as you can see, you'll see the slide progression. We can't seem to get it to work correctly in the correct mode, but this should work just fine. So Chairman, esteemed members of the State Shooting Complex Oversight Task Force, it is our honor to be sitting here in front of you today to present our team's proposal for a world-class shooting complex here in central Wyoming. In the heart of Wyoming. We're thrilled to be among the final, what I understand now, maybe 3 locations that you will be considering for this exciting project. But we want to share that no matter where the location ultimately is, we are very enthusiastic about this project for Wyoming and understand the opportunities that could bring to our state in terms of our continued efforts to strengthen our economy through tourism. So just to do some introductions, of course, Dr. Devine already introduced himself as the retired college president for Casper College. So he is an education and subject matter expert in shooting, as he explained. So while Dr. Devine and I will be presenting to you today, we do have a couple of other people that we would like to introduce, as our local committee here was comprised of several industry experts and community leaders throughout Casper and the surrounding area. And so again, while we will provide the primary presentation today, we may request permission to call on some of these folks to answer some of the various questions that you could have later on in the presentation. I do want to say that it is my pleasure to have been working with this team of professionals for nearly a year now, pretty much as soon as you announced your intention for this project. And so this dedicated team has been meeting regularly, often weekly, especially most recently, for that entire time. And as such, I've gotten to know them all pretty well. And so I want to thank you, the task force, for giving me that opportunity to connect more deeply with some of the leaders in our community. I think it definitely has benefited us all to work so closely together in service to our community in the great state of Wyoming. So in the audience, you may recognize some of them with red matching shirts that say Central Wyoming Shooting Complex. Charlie Shop was one of our members. He is a real estate agent here in Casper and a subject matter
Could we get
expert.
them to raise their hands? We can.
And a subject matter expert. He's also an avid shooter, and so his expertise comes in the shotgun disciplines. Dave North, Natrona County Commissioner, also here. His expertise comes in local government, of course, as a county commissioner and a subject matter expert in shooting sports as well. My name is Alima Lopez. I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Public Facilities here for the city of Casper. I have 25 years of experience in municipal government, although I've only been in my current role for about 3 years, excuse me. I do have widespread experience in municipal operations, including sanitary sewer, fleet maintenance, building maintenance, and now all parks and recreation, including the administration of our management contract for the Ford Wyoming Center here in Casper. Dick J has also joined our team as a retired banking executive with some expertise in the financial world. Tyler Doherty with our local visitor and convention bureau, also known as Visit Casper, is here and has contributed in the way of tourism expertise. Justin Farley with Advanced Casper is here and represented our team from the economic development standpoint. And then Captain Jeremy Tremmel with our Casper Police Department is here and has given us quite some insights that have been useful in the area of law enforcement. So as our team considered whether or not to make a pitch that we believed the state shooting complex should be here in Casper, in central Wyoming. We really focused our evaluation on what we understood to be the key objectives of the project or the desires of the task force. So as described really succinctly in your request for proposals, we understood the intent to be to construct a world-class shooting complex in Wyoming that meets the following objectives. We want to increase economic opportunities and development for Wyoming. And as we understood it, that meant leveraging Wyoming's Second Amendment protections to bring competitions to Wyoming that can't be held in other states because of increasing legislation on magazine capacities and other ammunition restrictions. In addition, we understood that you wanted to have the capability to host large shooting events in various shooting disciplines. Another primary objective was to increase shooting related opportunities to Wyoming residents throughout the state, and then to provide for outdoor education activities distinct from firearms training.
I'd like to jump in here real quick and talk about that first sub-bullet. Leveraging Wyoming's Second Amendment. While we certainly embrace the idea of a world-class shooting complex in all shooting disciplines, I am an avid shooter. If it has a trigger and goes bang, I'm a real fan. However, we do believe, as I'm sure all the locations do, we do believe that one of the places that Wyoming can really stand out is this Second Amendment freedoms. You know, when you look at the Cameo facility in Colorado, which I'm quite familiar with, been there and run matches several times. It's a wonderful, wonderful facility that was torpedoed by politics, at least currently torpedoed by politics because of magazine restrictions. You know, what happened is they built that facility with the stated goal of attracting in this case, USPSA national events. They succeeded within 6 years. They had 4 nationals. The first year that they had those nationals in year 6, they held 1. The other 3 pulled out because of magazine restrictions and because of a technicality that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife chose to enforce. But increasingly across the country, as many of you probably know, there are states that are adding more and more restrictions on magazine size, on mode of fire, on all sorts of things. And so when you look at things like USPSA 3-gun, general rifle matches, you know, this is a place where Wyoming can truly shine and say that, look, we have these freedoms that other states don't. And so that's one of our efforts to focus in on sports that we get that extra competitive advantage over other states that don't have those freedoms.
So as our local committee evaluated, we considered first, can we meet those objectives as we understood them of this project and the objectives of the task force as we understood? And second, do we want it? Do we want a facility like this in our area? Does it make sense to have it for our community? Does it fit with our community goals and current initiatives? And the answer is yes. Emphatically, enthusiastically, resoundingly, yes, absolutely, we want it. So for the next little bit, Dr. Devine and I are going to go through and explain why we feel we are so excited about this project and focus on 3 critical components that we really feel make Central Wyoming a strong, I would argue the strongest candidate to host this facility in our state. We'll discuss the economic impact a facility in Central Wyoming can bring to the state of Wyoming. We'll discuss the viability and sustainability of the facility if it were to exist here in our area. And we'll finish off with a discussion on how we believe our location offers diversity, flexibility, and very importantly, safety. After we cover these important topics, we'll also try to walk through some possible concerns that it appeared the committee had after reviewing the scoring rubric that you provided so that we can give an opportunity for us to explain and for you to ask questions to address some of those concerns. So to start, let's look at economic development and impact to Wyoming. One of the primary objectives, as we understood by the task force. So here in central Wyoming, we believe that we have a clear advantage. Note that this is just a summary. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics, but just to summarize, we believe that we'll serve as the centerpiece in Wyoming for competitive and recreational shooting, for firearm training, and for outdoor recreation education for the state and beyond. We will maximize the economic benefits of Wyoming by keeping tourism and development dollars here in our state. Central Wyoming, we believe, provides the perfect starting point for visitors to experience everything that Wyoming has to offer to visitors and even to locals. I know that very recently, my husband and I have made it a goal to travel across the state to places that we have never enjoyed together to get to know what all of the assets, the wonderful assets that we have and offer throughout the state of Wyoming. We believe that Central Wyoming has adequate support infrastructure in place already and is growing to be able to support these large events. And we want to bring some of the largest events to this community. That includes transportation, hotel, retail, dining, activities, and emergency services, which are all very important when you're talking about hosting large events that bring hundreds of people to the community, if not thousands. And then we also believe that a world-class shooting facility adjacent to our Ford, Wyoming Center, our arena event center, and the Wyoming Sports Ranch, which we will talk a little bit more about later in the presentation, as well as the North Platte Park development, which is adjacent to the site we're proposing, creates infinite opportunities and synergy for this project. So when we say with confidence that we believe that Central Wyoming is best positioned to keep tourism and economic development dollars in Wyoming, this is a graphic representation of why we wholeheartedly believe that. This map is from smappin.com and shows a 150-mile driving distance from each of the larger cities within the now 3 proposed areas. Didn't have time this morning quite to remove Cheyenne as a consideration, but Casper, Cody, and Gillette are seen here. Now on the slide, it does say red. There's been some argument among the committee whether that's truly red. Some say mauve, some say pink.
I think it's mauve. I think she's wrong, but we'll stick with red.
Either way, it is outlined in white, and most of you hopefully know where Casper is, considering that's where we're visiting today. So you see Park County or Cody in green, Gillette in purple. And again, worth noting that 150 miles via interstate is roughly about 2 hours, up to 3 hours if you're on, 2-lane highway or mountain passes, maybe even longer. But in all cases, except for in central Wyoming, this allows people to get outside of the state into other communities. Billings, Rapid, Denver in the case of Cheyenne. But for someone who comes to shoot in Casper, 150 miles will get you barely to Nebraska. And anybody that's really excited to go there, God bless them. But otherwise, they're going to be well within the state of Wyoming and stay here. And this is really important when we talk about day shooting events or even shooting competitions that structure for half-day events over consecutive days, as Dr. Devine has explained to me, is pretty common.
Yeah, let me jump in and just explain that in my world. Again, there's lots of shooting sports, and so I can't speak to all of those, but I will speak to the world that I live in, pistol, 2-gun, 3-gun world. The way you build the largest match possible is you do a minimum of a 2-day event. So you'll have competitors come in, let's say in a large event, an area event, for instance, there's going to be 14 stages. You're going to come in, you're going to shoot 7 of those one day. You're going to come back, shoot 7 the next day. That way you can double the number of competitors that you can allow into the tournament. So what that means is you'll come in and shoot a morning one day, and you'll shoot an afternoon the next day. And then awards might be after that, or awards might be on the next day. Lots of different places do it different ways. But it's very common, at least again, in my world, to have at least a day, or excuse me, half a day each day where you can go out and do different things. Go out, whether that's go out, get a bite to eat, go out, see the local scenes, go out, see the local sporting goods stores. as shooters, we're kind of single-minded, so almost everybody goes to the sporting goods stores, even though we know what's there and we know what the price is, we're still going to go for some reason. So, I think this is very important. We have several other slides that'll illustrate this point,
Starting now.
which is one here. I'm sorry, I forgot. So when I think about economic impact, and this is something obviously in my former life, I thought about a lot. In my private life, I haven't thought about as much, but lately I have been thinking quite a bit about it. So when you think about the economic impact, and you especially think about the tourism aspect of, and let's use the Wyoming Governor's Cup, Wyoming Governor's Match, which my club will host here in the third week of July. We have about 200 shooters coming in for that match. I think of three distinct groups, or three distinct, let's call them categories: shooters, shooters with significant others, and families. And the tourism activities are going to look different for each of those. Right. When I go to a match, usually I'm working the match, not always, but usually. So by the time the day's done, I'm looking for a good restaurant and a soft bed. That's all I'm really looking for. If my wife goes with me, which she does occasionally, then some other things. In my particular case, that's quilting shops. If there's not a quilting shop, I'm in trouble. Right. That's what she really likes. And then, of course, a little bit more day activities. If we're talking about a competitor that comes with their family and maybe small children, that's a whole nother level, right? That's usually, as most of you know, now we're talking about pools. Donnell's is very popular with the families here in Casper, and different shopping opportunities. So you really have that full gambit of things you need to think about. And we do believe that Casper can meet all of those, no matter the season that we're talking about, whether we're in the typical shooting season from late spring to middle of the fall. We believe that we have those not only for competitors, but for competitors and their families.
Dr. Devine,
Mr. Chair.
in your world, what's the breakdown of those three groups? How many shooters bring families? How many come with a spouse, and how many come alone?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. That's a great question, and I'm going to not give you such a great answer, but I'll try. In my experience, it really depends on the time of year. So if you're talking about late spring, early summer to, and then again, middle to late fall, you're looking at competitors and maybe their spouses. Summertime, in the middle of the summer, quite often you're looking at families. I would say in my experience, families probably on an average match for me, 20% probably of competitors come in with their families. Although I want to, be full disclosure, it's hard to know because I'm hanging out at the range and a lot of the families don't even, they drop off mom or dad in the parking lot, kick them out, and, they just slow down and kick them out. So, but I would say it's probably, at least for the match here, that I know I'm there almost all the time and see pretty much all the background. It's about 20%, I would say.
Thank you. Please continue. Mr. Goldman.
So just a quick follow-up. Do you have a kind of a rough estimate on, are they traveling here in RVs or fifth wheels, or there's more staying in hotels?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question. So let's start at the most expensive and go downward. Flying into a match, except for something like nationals. So for me, this fall, when I have to go to nationals 2 different times, that's in Alabama. So I'm going to fly. I really don't have a choice. But when you talk about anything from regional down to local, usually the folks that fly in are sponsors, professional shooters that we're bringing in. It's very common to bring in a professional shooter, a big name, to draw to draw competitors, right? We've had Jerry Misalik, the last, 3 years, at our match because everyone wants to shoot with Jerry, right? He's the nicest guy and his wife, they're the nicest folks you'll ever want to meet. So you'll see those folks fly in, you'll see the sponsors fly in. Let's say the average shooter, very small, probably less than 5%, right? That the flights on regional and local. Now, again, if you want to bring in a national competition, completely different. Yeah, that's probably 50% of your competitors at a national level, at least.
Thank you. Please continue.
So we want to emphasize that it is our expectation that having a facility in central Wyoming will serve the rest of Wyoming very well. For shooters who want to make a vacation out of coming to a shoot in Casper, we're the perfect jumping off point for many Wyoming adventures. So remember in that 150 mile radius map that we showed, people can get to Douglas, Buffalo, Sheridan, Lander, Thermopolis, Laramie, and more within 150 miles of our location. Extend that just a little bit further and you're into Cheyenne, Devil's Tower, the road to Yellowstone, including potential stops in DuBois, Pinedale, Cody, and Jackson. So even if you don't stay in Casper, we believe that our shooters will stay in Wyoming. So I apologize for how busy this map is. Since I'm not in presentation mode, it's not going to display exactly the way that we intended. But the map intends to show you Casper's location and highlight the point that Interstate 25 runs right through Casper. Interstates become particularly important, as I understand it, when it comes to people who are coming here with large RVs or fifth wheels. My understanding again, and I don't own one of these assets, but my understanding is that those drivers generally do prefer interstate travel to 2-lane road travel and especially to mountain pass travel, just because of the size of the vehicles they're driving and the fact that they generally do not travel as fast as other vehicles. In addition to that, we want to highlight that along interstate corridors, we generally have better access to electric vehicle charging stations, which are becoming more and more important. And I think that gives people traveling in EVs a sense of comfort knowing that they are on an interstate and should have access to those assets should they need to refuel, so to speak. But if you are intending to fly, hopefully for the national matches that we will be hosting, we do offer service through the Ventura County International Airport, Wyoming's only international airport, with service currently through United and Delta. Once you're at the airport or even just in the community, we offer vehicle rental services through Alamo, Hertz, Budget, pretty much all the major companies involved in vehicle rental services. And then in Casper proper, we do have transit, public transit through our Casper Area Link system, as well as rideshare services through Lyft and Uber and a number of taxi services as well.
Mr. Corsi, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. Actually, question for you, Dr. Devine. In your world, the number of these matches that you've attended, what is the percentage that you would put on those that travel with an RV or a pull behind camper?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Corsi, thank you for that question. I think I neglected to get back earlier. I apologize for that. Again, let's stay at a regional and below level, because I think that's really probably the largest numbers, it's certainly of tournaments. I would say I would put air travel at less than 5%. I would put car travel at probably 80%, 80 to 85. Then we'd put RV 15, 20% level. The best of my knowledge, Mr. Corsi.
Mr. Corsi?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, he had a follow-up.
Follow-up? No.
So, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lopez, you talked about the airlines, and I just read the paper here recently where the county decided not to provide the subsidy. And just for those on the committee, every airplane that flies into the state of Wyoming is subsidized through state and local governments. And so it's the only way we can get air service into Wyoming. So what impact do you see that decision makes on this number of individuals, and how will that impact the overall tourism aspect associated with this facility?
Ms. Lopez?
Limiting or reducing the access for air access.
Chair, members of the committee. So we would say that Delta really offers only one flight in and one flight out of Casper. Our primary carrier is United. And so there would really be a decrease in impact, although, and I should not speak for other members of the committee who are much more ingrained in our air service than I am. But I do believe that we would actively seek another carrier, as Casper has had multiple carriers multiple times throughout our history. There. I'm getting the thumbs up that was accurate.
Please continue.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Co-Chair, let me tag on to that question. Thank you for the question. Obviously, it's all over the news. It's something we can't hide. Again, at the regional and below level of matches, which are the vast majority of matches that a state location offers, the loss is not significant. At a national level, it is something to think about. But again, United is our major carrier. United has 4 or 5 flights a day. So we don't believe it would be a significant impact, but I'm certainly not going to say it would be a 0 impact.
Very good. Please continue.
So I would say that Central Wyoming, and specifically Casper, knows a thing or two about hosting big events. And we know that to successfully host those events, you have to have adequate lodging, especially if you want people to stay. And so we think that Central Wyoming is in a great position in this regard. We have abundant, diverse, and affordable lodging. And what you saw in your proposal and the numbers proposed here are all within 15 to 20 minutes of the proposed complex site. That's over 2,300 hotel and motel rooms. 474 are currently actually under construction in our community. We have an average occupancy rate of 63% and an average daily rate of $106, making stays in Casper very easy to access and very affordable. We have over 1,400 camping spaces, 462 Airbnb listings that span other similar sites. And then when you consider options that are in that 1 to 2 hour range from Casper, that increases quite substantially. So we definitely feel like we are positioned well to host large events and have the lodging accommodations necessary for people to enjoy.
Ms. Lopez, those figures, 63% occupancy and $106, is that during the prime shooting season or is that year round?
Chair, that is an average annual occupancy rate. But as I understand it, really, unless you're talking about traveling here during college national finals rodeo or during one of the large state championships, that's a pretty steady rate. Unlike other communities in Wyoming, we're not a summer tourist destination necessarily. And so our occupancy during the summer season doesn't spike, with the exception of large events that we may have during that time.
Thank you. Please
And Mr. Chair, if I might, I will freely admit to my level of, one could say efficiency, one could say laziness. I choose efficiency. As I was one who worked on that slide, those numbers actually come directly out of the report. There's a chart that shows you the monthly, and you'll see that if you want to go in and do just a summary, you'll see that Casper does not fluctuate very much. The 106, especially for the $106 and the occupancy rate, they are relatively close, but those numbers do come directly out of that table in the report.
Thank you. Please continue.
So these are just some of the properties in Casper, ranging from what would be classified as 2 upscale properties to our economy properties, and of course, highlighting the camping and RV options as well. So another critical consideration when you're trying to host large events is food and beverage options. We believe Central Wyoming has a lot to offer in this area as well. We have a phenomenal mix of dining options to fit all tastes: American, Italian, Mexican, Indian, Thai. The opportunities are really quite vast here. When friends or family come to visit me in Casper, I generally will not let them leave without having a steak at the Silver Fox or at Fire Rock and having a cocktail at Backwards Distillery. So those are just two examples. They never leave disappointed. So I do believe that we have a great mix of dining and drink options for shooters that come to the community either alone with their buddies or with their families. So contrary to what I may have assumed kind of early on, Dr. Devine has assured me that shooting is actually quite a safe sport, especially in the competitive competition world. However, anytime you talk about bringing very large events with hundreds or thousands of people, emergency services are definitely something that need to be considered. So it's important to note here that Banner Wyoming Medical Center is Wyoming's only trauma 2 center. In Converse County Memorial Hospital has a location here in Casper, as well as in our Converse County, in Douglas, which you'll note was a county that offered a letter of support for this facility in central Wyoming. We have
What's the distance, if I may, from your proposed site to the Wyoming Medical Center Hospital? What's the distance?
Chairman, I don't know the exact distance.
Let Dr. Devine look it up.
Yeah,
Get back
while
to
he
us.
looks it up, I'm going to give you an estimate of 15 minutes or less, I believe.
Please continue.
Our Wyoming Life Flight service is based out of Casper, and we have 14 specialty, intermediate, and immediate care facilities. I think it's also important to note here that many of the medical professionals and trained EMS staff in our community, which span from paid fire EMS staff to volunteer fire EMS staff, and even to volunteer emergency workers such as our complete volunteer ski patrol up at Hogadon ski area. They often donate their time to large events to provide on-site EMS service if that is needed during a large event. So again, whether it's shooting related or not, if a contestant has a cardiac event or some other, heat related event, we can generally have staff on site there. And then again, within a short amount of time, ambulance or transport somebody to our facility.
Dr. Devine?
Excuse me, I apologize. Mr. Chair, the distance between the site to Banner Medical is just about 3 miles.
Please continue. Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question about distance to a trauma 1 facility, you said trauma 2. What would that be? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lopez, we only have a trauma 2, right, in Central Wyoming?
Excuse me, yes, I must have misspoke. We are a level 2 trauma facility.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kolb, I believe the question is, since we only have a level 2, how close is the nearest level 1? The closest, I would give you the 2. I don't know right off the top of my head which is closer. It would either be in Denver or, excuse me, in Billings. Billings and Denver are the 2 closest trauma ones.
Please continue.
So we didn't just make assumptions about the economic impact that we believe the shooting complex in central Wyoming would bring. We actually had it studied. So we contracted with the University of Wyoming Center for Business and Economic Analysis to help us understand the impact a facility like this would have on our community and our state. And here are the results of that summarized very succinctly. So the primary things we want to point out is that in total, the estimated impact of construction in the first 5 years of operation is just over $39 million. And then the estimated annual impact once the facility is stabilized in operations, which we estimate to be about year 5, an estimated impact of over $5.5 million a year. We want to emphasize over and over, and we will a couple of times in this presentation, that these are very conservative estimates, but we really needed to know again as a community if this makes sense for us, if we want it and need it here, and if it's sustainable to have in our community. And so we are satisfied with the results, knowing again that these are pretty conservative estimates. And the study itself, to summarize a quote, in addition to the economic impacts, Natrona County is uniquely suited to host the Wyoming shooting complex for many reasons. Some of these reasons include the county's central location in Wyoming, excuse me, being home of the only international airport in Wyoming, the presence of Interstate 25, existing sporting infrastructure, as well as local services and business that help facilitate large sporting events, and a sufficient workforce to support the projects, just to name a few. So we believe, based on the report that we got from the University of Wyoming, that they agree that this is a great location to place this facility, and the economic benefits here could be better than they would be in other communities in the state.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, so when I went through your business plan and you talked about retaining 2.7 million out of the original appropriation, and you look at the subsidy and you ratchet that subsidy up over a 5-year period, 35% subsidy all the way up to, I believe, a 60 or 70% subsidy. And so within your 5-year plan, that 2.7 million that wasn't used for initial construction is exhausted. It's gone. And yet I see nothing in the business plan that then comes back and says, how are you going to replace that $2.7 million of subsidy that was the original money that was set aside? And so within the whole economic business plan, it looks to me, we get to year 5, we don't know where the money's coming from. And so how are you going to address that shortfall? Because you are relying on your business plan that you presented, that 2.7 million would retain an account and be provided on an annual basis over 5 years as a subsidy to support the facility. What happens at year 6 when that money's completely exhausted? Who's going to replace it?
Chairman Hicks, thank you for that question. When we developed the business plan, and I admit I did the vast majority of that development, we did anticipate that there would be a subsidy. And as you explained it, the subsidy would increase over time. Yes, that is true. Although we expect, based on the performance of other shooting complexes that we have spoken to in research of this project, that by year 5, that would stabilize and the cost recovery would actually be closer to 60%. So the subsidy in year 5 would be approximately 40% or better. We asked to carve out that initial subsidy investment to give us time to build the business and stabilize the operation. By year 6, it is our expectation that we would find a way to manage that subsidy on our own. Again, we proposed a model very similar to what we have in the Ford Wyoming Center. The Ford Wyoming Center is an event center that brings a significant amount of economic impact to our community at the cost of a subsidy. The community subsidizes it anywhere from $600,000 a year to $1 million a year. But we see the value in having that facility in our community and what it brings in terms of economy. And so we continue to subsidize it. It is our expectation that the that the Joint Powers Board that governs that facility will find ways come year 5 to manage that subsidy. And there's a number of different ways we can do that. We believe in by talking to other shooting facilities and experts that help develop business plans and designs for complexes like this, that we can get very creative, just like we have with the Ford Wyoming Center, in generating revenue outside of large competitions, right? So focusing on local training, focusing on memberships, focusing on sponsorships and corporate naming rights are all opportunities that we would have to lower that subsidy over time and make it more manageable, going onward. But in that first 5-year development period, we felt like it was important to have those subsidy dollars funded and available so that while we're trying to build a business, we're not also trying to figure out where the shortfall is going to come from.
Follow up, typically within the construction component, I mean, I deal with a number of state agencies that have very large budgets, hundreds and hundreds of $1 million of construction. And we just bake in automatically a 10 to 15% contingency. I didn't see that in your program. It's predicated on an actual cost. I don't see the contingency. Would that be addressed? Let's assume that the construction, like anybody in construction knows, escalating cost. We get to 5 years and it's just, and so that's one question. Where's the contingency baked in and how are you going to deal with that? It's
That's
just
a lot
good
better.
business management. Then I've got to follow up on the next one too.
Mr. Chair, and Mr. Co-Chair, thank you for the question. The vast majority of the construction of a shooting complex in the early stages is dirt moving. It's earthwork. There's very little, although there certainly will be a building or more, especially in the first phase. The vast majority of the expense is earth moving. Leveling, berm building, berm construction, drainage. One of the things that you will see in the project is that we have a significant amount of in-kind that we have identified. Most of that in-kind is in construction. One of our biggest goals is to have as much as possible the construction, all the earthwork, all of the earth moving, the berm building done on in-kind construction, in-kind basis. And so that would be, at least in reference to the construction, that's one of the reasons that you don't see that 10% overage or 10% contingency in that particular budget.
So, Mr. Chairman, so just to continue kind of along this line so again, looking at the business plan and the budget, you get to that 5 years, that 2.7 million would be exhausted in your budget, no contingency in there. And so this will get to a little bit of a larger discussion, but so what happens, budget was predicated and built on the proposed designs that you submitted with the appropriate amount of earthwork, dirt work, in-kind contribution. Looks impressive, it's good. Well, what about future build out? So one thing is the management side. You said we think we can come up with sponsorship, memberships and address, that's the annual O&M for the facility. Where's the money come from after year 5 when the subsidy is completely gone? And so what is the plan for the build out? Is this just a one and done? Is that how the way I read the proposal, that's the concept that was presented in the proposal. Once we get this thing up and running in a year or two, that's it. That's the facility and it's just O&M after that within the budget.
Dr. Devine.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Mr. Co-Chair, thank you for the question. One of the things we tried very hard to do, and you've heard Ms. Lopez use this term quite often, and I'm going to use it again, and I apologize if we're beating a dead horse. This facility has to be a fit for the state. It has to be a fit for the town or city that it's located in. And so we tried incredibly hard to not extend beyond what we believe is a reasonable timetable and a reasonable horizon to plan for. So will this project, no matter where it's built, be in multiple phases? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Can we sit here, did we feel comfortable giving you phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 build outs? No, sir, we did not. We believe that beyond the 5-year time frame, it is very difficult to foresee what the shooting sports and the shooting world is going to look like after 5 years. We have no idea from our point of view. Again, and I'm not suggesting anyone who has done that is wrong. I'm simply saying the approach that we've taken. We think that if you go past that about 5-year time frame, it's very difficult to know what the next shooting sport is going to be. What's the next hot topic going to be? Where is the other shooting facilities that have popped up fitting into the grand scheme of things? South Dakota is building a facility right now that is nearing completion. We don't know what their emphasis is going to be. We don't know where their competitive advantage is going to be. So do we foresee this project having multiple phases? Yes, sir, we do. Were we comfortable trying to give you hey, this is what it's going to look like in 15 years? No, sir, we did not. Now, if that is an error, that is absolutely on us and we own that, but that's the approach we've taken. Now, again, back to your original question, which is a fantastic question and a very good point. Where's that money going to come from? Again, in that first 5 years, it is going to be up to no matter whether it's in Central Wyoming, no matter whether it's in Cody, no matter whether it's in Gillette, the location and the folks that run it are going to have to figure out what's your competitive advantage. What shooting sports are you going to attract the largest number of people? And I'm going to submit to you that telling you right now, the shooting sports that are going to attract the greatest number of participants in 5 years is very hard. So you're going to have those first few years to figure that out and to budget for that and to find out. Now, I would say in year 2, you darn well better have a plan of what you're going to do in year 5. Right? That's a moving window. You darn sure better figure out, okay, where's the next phase going to be? What does the landscape look like? What is the next shooting sport that has the largest participation?
Senator Cole. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just to circle back on the subsidy question. It doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy feeling to hear that, well, I hope it'll turn out this way and it should turn out this way. Been witness to many things that didn't turn out that way. I'm looking for a commitment to deal with this. I mean, in that commitment conveys motivation, right? Because I mean, if you set the bar low, it'll be a low bar. So I guess I'd like maybe you could feel comfortable, or maybe you want to get back with this question, but a hope and a dream about a subsidy that you're currently getting and saying, I'm going to try not to make it anything, like it's going to be at a 0 point at one point. It doesn't give me any reassurance that, this is going to be a continued cost that's just going to escalate with inflation. And just, could you, I guess, make me feel more comfortable on that question, Doctor? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, Senator Cole, we will get back to you on that. I will tell you that what you'll find is most shooting complexes across the country are run on subsidies. If the idea is to come in with a world-class shooting complex that is going to be self-sustaining and is going to create millions of dollars worth of the economic input into the state, within the first couple of years, especially, that's going to be very, very difficult. Now, I completely understand you're talking about, past year 5 and past the first several years. We absolutely will get back to you on that.
Ms. Lopez, one second. Ms. Lopez, can you elaborate a little bit on the model with the Ford Wyoming Center and the ongoing, has the local government continued to adjust subsidies as appropriate to continue that ongoing success?
Chairman, in terms of the operation of the Ford Wyoming Center, we've partnered with a private management company for a number of years now, and we made that conscious choice because we knew that a private venue management company would be a little better equipped to solicit touring acts, solicit sponsorships and naming rights, do those things that our local staff didn't necessarily have expertise in. And we would imagine the same for this facility. Certainly, despite rising costs across the board, record inflation over the last several years since COVID, we have actually managed to decrease the subsidy at the Ford Wyoming Center, which, pre-COVID was nearly $1 million a year. This year, we expect to come in somewhere in the vicinity of about $650,000 a year for the operating loss. And we attribute that to those efforts by our very well-connected, very professional, very structured management company. And, the idea that and I'm not going to speak for the rest of my committee members, but the idea that I have in watching operation of rec facilities throughout my department and throughout the state of Wyoming is that despite our best efforts, this will likely continue to be a subsidized operation, especially if we are going to offer it as a rec resource for our state and our locals as well. Just the cost of personnel alone to operate a facility like that is quite high. And while we feel like we have a strong volunteer workforce, to think that we could rally the 60,000 hours that Cameo seems to get in volunteer assistance a year, is probably not realistic. So we did try to stay very realistic and very conservative in our estimates so that we were not proposing something that we did not feel we could follow through with.
Senator Kolb, your follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Be more direct. Obviously, it's going to require a subsidy, okay? The issue is just what that number is. Honesty, and I don't mean you're dishonest, but an honest number that I can understand, because you know, the reality is it's going to require a subsidy for a lot of other reasons, you know, that you mentioned. But a realistic number, where the heck are we going and what the heck is it going to cost? That's my question. I'm sorry for my indirectness. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Ms. Lopez.
I think Josh had a question.
Chairman,
Okay.
Senator, we will absolutely provide that. I do believe that in our proposal, if you look at that 5th year, we believe that that is a stabilized number and that the subsidy would likely be that amount into future years, barring, you know, some great innovations that we can come up with, which I believe we can, in increasing the revenue stream to that facility so that it comes down. We do not believe that it will exceed the number that we proposed in year 5. And I apologize, I don't have that number right up.
And Ms. Lopez, where do you see that subsidy coming from? What's the source of that subsidy in years 6 to 10, for example?
Chairman, so when we developed the operating budget through the 5 years, the primary cost is going to be personnel, generally is. So to have an operation that is soliciting, you know, large events to come to our community, take somebody that has some expertise in sales. You're going to need a general manager for the facility. You're going to need maintenance staff for the facility, whether it's, you know,
I get
ground
that, but
staff.
Where's the money come from for years after the first 5 years? Who's
I
the
see it,
source? Is
apologize.
it going to be state revenues, state money that you're looking for? City of Casper going to cover some of that ongoing subsidy? Natrona County, what's the source of that subsidy after the first 5 years?
Chairman, thank you. I apologize that I misunderstood your question originally. So we anticipate that the Joint Powers Board will have stakeholders that will manage the facility and more importantly, manage the administration of the facility through a private manager or operating company, whichever may be the case. And as is the case with the Ford Wyoming Center, we actually share in that subsidy with our manager. So if the subsidy exceeds a certain threshold, they share in the loss right along with us. In terms of the net operating loss that we know we will carry currently, because that is a City of Casper owned and operated facility, the City of Casper carries that subsidy. We would recommend that the Joint Powers Board, as a holistic stakeholder group, would share in that subsidy come year 5 if it's necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Corsi, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think actually, Ms. Lopez, you just touched on what I was going to ask, so I rescind that. Thank you.
Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lopez stated that she, in their analysis, had decided that the economic benefit was better for a Casper location than other locations. And my question was this based on part of that University of Wyoming study? Was there data that backed that up, or did you just study the impact of Casper?
Ms. Lopez.
Chairman, thank you for that question. So we did gather that from the University of Wyoming study. We asked some very pointed questions of the members of that team that were conducting the study, and they specifically used Natrona County data. Now, they did indicate to us that in order to compare, for instance, to what Park County could bring or to what Campbell County could bring, that was obviously outside of the scope of what we asked them for. We asked them to evaluate Natrona County. But the indication was that if we were to enter the exact same data set that we provided for another county, Natrona County would rise above given the industry, taxes, population, all of the things that we have here in our community.
Follow up or?
Is that data for that study available?
Ms. Lopez?
Chairman, absolutely.
Mr. Goldman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe follow up a little bit on Senator Kolb's question about the subsidy. I mean, when you talk about these subsidies, ideally, for $1 of subsidy, there's $1 of economic impact, or $3 or $10. Does this UW study, or do you know, for example, the Ford Wyoming Center, what is the economic impact versus the study, if that makes sense?
Ms. Lopez, do you understand the
Or
question?
versus subsidy, sorry.
Chairman, I believe I do. And I could tell you for the Ford Wyoming Center, it's about 20-fold. For every, we operate with the assumption, our benchmark for the Ford Wyoming Center is $912,000 a year in loss. And for that, which again, we're coming in well below that in recent years, but before that investment, we expect about $20 to $25 million in economic return. The shooting complex, as it is proposed right now, does not give us quite that same return. We're looking at a couple $100,000 subsidy a year to gain about $6 million in economic benefit. Again, very conservative estimates, very conservative data set that we provided to the University of Wyoming team. We think that we can outperform that. We just didn't want to make that commitment. I think the other thing that is really important to note is that we developed this internally based on our expertise, the operations that we run, the operations that we're familiar with, the models for those operations that we're familiar with. However, our data was vetted by RDG Planning and Design, which is a professional consultant located or doing work nationally with an arm that specializes in shooting complexes. They reviewed the data that we submitted and said, this looks very feasible, realistic, reasonable, and attainable. And so we would expect, however, that if Central Wyoming was in fact the location to be chosen for this facility, we would partner with experts, third-party experts that would help us build out the pro forma and give better estimates in terms of what the performance could be over time.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Corsi, you have a question? I see your hand up. Nope. Ms. Co-Chairman.
So, and I'll try to wrap this up. I guess that, so when I look at this and under your budget, your proposed budget, by year 5, it's an $806,000 subsidy for the facility. I think the thing that I'm looking for is similar to Kolb, and you proposed a joint powers board, and you've alluded to the Ford Center that's successful. And you've actually identified people. I guess what I'm looking for, and I think this is what, I'm looking for a commitment, not a dollar amount, a commitment. And so who on that joint powers board is going to make that commitment to say, look, we're in for the subsidy, we're in for the subsidy, we're in for the subsidy. And then how does that private manager role play into that? I think that's the question we're looking at, is saying, look, we need somebody to say, yeah, we're on the hook. And that's what I'm looking for.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, let me try to give you a wrap up of that. Not being a member of state government, obviously Ms. Lopez has to be a little bit careful. If she goes, I did tease her last night that since our city manager's out of town, I was gonna say that he has approved up to $8 million a year to run this facility. And she decided that unemployment probably wasn't such a good thing. It's an excellent question, sir. And we're not trying to obfuscate, Senator Kolb. Please, I hope you understand, we're not trying to obfuscate anything. We're not trying to hide anything. However, let's jump ahead just real quick in the proposal. You'll see for our governance structure, it's proposed, right? That's what we think after thinking long and hard about this. We think that's for a facility located in the state of Wyoming. We think that's a good structure. A good proposed governance structure. However, it's up to the legislature to ultimately decide how that is going to be structured. And so we are completely open to how that could be. It would be, and I know you understand this, it would be almost impossible for us to go to the city of Casper, the city of Glen Rock, the city of Mills, the city of Evansville, and say, hey, would you give us a dollar value that you're willing to put skin in the game for a proposal that we don't know if it's going to be accepted, for a proposed governance structure that we don't know that they're actually going to be on. Now, again, since I'm not a government agency, I will tell you this. In all of our discussions, we have not made the assumption that the state is going to put any dollars into this past the original 10 million. So in all of our discussions, we have never started from the idea that the subsidy is going to come from the legislature each and every year. We have not made that. Now, on several people's wish lists that the state might be able to put some money into that, I'm not going to lie to you, that's certainly there. But in all of our discussions, the idea has been, you know what? The Joint Powers Board, whoever is going to be on that, this subsidy is going to have to come from the skin in the game, is going to have to come from the agencies, or excuse me, the entities who are backing this up.
So, Mr. Chairman, just one follow-up on this, and it gets to the whole idea of subsidies and stuff. And the facilities that you looked at are all government-run facilities by state agencies. You know, Ben Avery, NRA may be an exception with the Whittington Center, but it's a nonprofit organization that was donated a large ranch. There is private shooting facilities around the Western United States that actually run for a profit. And did you look at any of that? I don't want to prejudge and just go that this is automatically going to be a subsidy, because that's where we'll end up. And so did you look at any of those other facilities? And they typically are shotgun type ranges in the Southeast and places, but there is places where they operate and actually make money. And did you look at that component?
Dr. Devine.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, thank you. And you're absolutely right. You know, in the last month, I've been to 2 facilities outside of the state. One in Weld County, Colorado, one in Billings. They're both wonderful ranges. They're absolutely wonderful ranges. I don't know whether they run at a profit. I believe both of them do, actually. Well, I take that back. Weld County is actually run by Fish and Game, but the Billings is a private company. You are correct. I would say a caveat that none of those ranges that I know of, I certainly won't say there's not one, because I don't know every single range in the country, but none of those ranges are a comprehensive world-class facility that you've asked for. So that's that next level that becomes hard. And I'm certainly not trying to be argumentative at all. You are 100% correct. There are some wonderful ranges. In fact, I'm blown away sorry, probably shouldn't use that pun. Yeah, probably not the most appropriate term. I apologize. I'm just amazed as I travel around the country, whether, you know, where you're talking at Hurricane, Utah, whether you're talking at the Billings Club, whether you go down to Weld County, whether you go down to Colorado Springs. There's some amazing, amazing facilities. And, you know, I don't envy any of you on this committee, right? Because what you have agreed to and what you have hitched your wagon to is a very, very, very difficult task, right? Because ultimately it's going to have to come down to, for $10 million, we cannot be the best at everything. It's simple, and you all know that there's nothing, no surprise. And so the hard part is going to be figuring out, you know what, we want to be the best at what we do. And so what are we going to do? How many disciplines does the state shooting complex want? You know, do we want to be the best at shooting sports that allow more than 15 rounds in the magazine? Do we want to be the best at AR sports? Do we want to be the best at sporting clays? Do we want to be the best at long range rifle? You know, those are decisions that we can make some suggestions, and we have, but that's truly, you know, what your committee and what your job is. And I do not envy you, because it's going to be a very difficult task.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a follow-up. I have a question that may be later in the presentation, but we spent a lot of time talking about shooting sports and ranges and stuff. there's another little component that we looked at in this initial thing. And so I don't know if you've got more on economic development and associated build out and how this range complements certain industry sectors. If you do, I'll wait to ask that question. If not, I'll ask it now. So do you have
Is there more to
more in your
come?
presentation to address that? If you do, I'll just wait.
Chairman's, yes, there
All
is more.
All right, please continue. Please continue.
Thank you. So back into the mindset, hopefully, of economic impact and development. So in addition to the economic impact that we believe that this site will generate from tourism, this project, we believe, will help propel economic development in Casper even further. So the North Platte Park development in Casper is primed to explode, we believe, in the next couple of years. This was spawned in large part by construction of what is called the Wyoming Sports Ranch, which is on a property just north of the Ford Wyoming Center. So it is a public-private partnership where the facility is located on City of Casper property in a long-term lease agreement, but it is being constructed wholly with, private dollars, excuse me. In fact, over $50 million worth of private dollars. And investment in our community. And so on the heels of this project, we are able to leverage 115 acres of city-owned property that's designated in this diagram in the colorful bubble colors, so that it can be privately developed, as is concepted out here, to include hotels, retail, food and beverage, recreation, and highway services, all within 5 minutes of the proposed site. And then in addition to this particular site, there is an estimated $40 million in retail development under planning and construction within the rest of Natrona County in another area. However, we do feel like all of these things combined are making Central Wyoming very attractive for industry to come to this location. And so we really want to emphasize that synergy there. This is just a more detailed concept that shows in the center part there are the hotels that are proposed. And in fact, we do have several hoteliers that have already contacted us. So this is in the works. It's not pie in the sky. This is really happening sometime in the very near future. Destination retail and recreation, including a small area, which we would hope to expand potentially for RV car parking and camping sites that would serve the entirety of the area quite well. The really exciting thing about having a shooting complex in such close proximity is that before, where we believe destination retail would primarily be those related to the youth sports that will be happening in the sports ranch. Now we believe it could very well attract destination retail more related to shooting. So it just offers a better mix of opportunity for this area to develop and create a hub of recreation and sports activities in Natrona County. So that covers economic impact. And of course, we got into the business plan quite a lot too. So you might see that we'll slide through some of those slides a little bit faster, but we do want to talk about viability and sustainability. We feel like we have the administrative building blocks in our community to make this project successful for the long term. We believe that we do have a viable and sustainable business plan, even with that dirty word subsidy included in that. So even though it shows an operating loss, which we do believe is likely, we will, of course, work very hard to reduce that subsidy over time, or even eliminate the subsidy. But as Dr. Devine indicated before, in order to do that, we need to know exactly which disciplines are going to be provided. And we expected that while we proposed what we proposed, the state may want a little bit more input into that. And so not knowing exactly what those disciplines are makes it really difficult for us to provide concrete projections today of what the costs are going to be, of what the participant numbers are going to be, of what events we can actually bring to the community. There's still a lot of unknown that we will certainly work to vet quickly once we are chosen as the location if that is the outcome. But without that concrete data to make those, this is the best educated business plan we could come up with. We do also believe that we have,
One
you know,
moment. Yeah, Director Glenn.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to go back a little bit on the business plan because I just bought a house in Cheyenne and I had to jump through all the hoops on financing and other things. And I'm looking at not the subsidies, but you're talking about needing at least $5 million more to invest the additional capital. And you'll say, we're going to get it in one of these 7 or 8 ideas, but they're not pinpointed what those ideas are. We're going to use in-kind for building these things, but it's not ID. We don't have the in-kind yet. So I'm struggling in my head and I get that you need to figure out what those disciplines are, but I'm struggling in my head to understand what, none of these may come through. And then what happens? Or do you have commitments? You know, you say an extra sales tax if the voters approve it, or we're going to try and go get grants. Do you have anything substantive that you can say, we have this money and we can put it towards that, or we have these 15 companies that have given us a commitment to do X, Y, and Z? Thank you.
Ms. Lopez, do we have more than a track record? Or is there actual money available?
Chairman, the short and honest answer is no. It has been difficult for us to approach industry, to approach other municipalities or counties with hard asks when we don't even know if this facility will be in Casper. You know, we have gotten letters of commitment. We've gotten verbal commitments. There are definitely interested parties in both the private sector and the public sector. But to say that we have specific commitments would be disingenuous.
I just want to call the committee's attention. I think we're on slide 17 of 55. So we might want to allow these folks to move along in their presentation.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
so maybe
Co-Chairman.
they can, their presentation, and it's again, it's a little bit within the business plan, and this ties back to the site, and you've identified in there that there's, I mean, like the archery range is not going to be located on this. Potentially, it will be maybe someplace else on Casper Mountain. You know, you may contract with adjacent facilities if there is a large event to do that. And I'm just wondering, within your governance structure of a joint powers board and then hire a contractor, and then you're going to lease a private facility next door, how all that's going to work. I mean, and I understand it's a little bit premature, but there's a lot of moving parts here in this proposal. From it's not all in-house and encapsulated in one site. It's kind of scattered. The future growth is limited a little bit by the site. I think that's why you guys look at a kind of a bifurcated model anyway of having different activities. But on the actual contracting and management, how is a private contracting firm working for the Joint Powers Board going to work with or manage an event on a private facility adjacent to it? So anyway,
Yes,
complexities in the model.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, we will identify that. Unfortunately, apparently, we didn't do a very good job. That is not how it is structured. But I will go through that when we get there,
Okay,
if you'll
all right.
allow me.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr.
Just
Messer.
to that vein, as we talk about having 42 minutes left, I don't want to throw you guys off track at all, but you spent the majority of your first portion on services, which you already ranked #1 in all the categories on. I think we kind of knew you were strong in services. It was great to reiterate it, but you were #2 in draw, #3 in future success, tied for 6th in site selection, with only 2 groups actually scoring lower than Casper on site. I would say, at least from my personal perspective on what I need to hear today before we make decisions over the next couple of days to move someone forward, is addressing the shortcomings more than addressing the things that you're already doing well.
Ms. Lopez.
Chairman, thank you for that feedback, and we can absolutely move in that direction. So the vast majority of the next few slides will actually address some of those things, starting with the business plan, which we've already talked about. And so I think that the biggest point we want to emphasize here is that this is a suggested structure. It can look a number of different ways. It can be successful in a number of different ways. And with the level of perceived ambiguity on our part in terms of what the requirement would be for the structure or the governance, this was our best recommendation, given the information, the knowledge, and the experience that we have at this time. So again, this can be modified. However, we do believe that a joint powers board with numerous stakeholders, small enough to be manageable, but large enough to have plenty of people with skin in the game, will be necessary to operate the facility or to oversee the facility. And this joint powers board would hire the operator, whether it's an individual or a management company. We would oversee that operation in a way that would make sure that the stakeholders' interests are being met, as well as the constituents' interests, the shooters' interests are being met. So again, just want to emphasize that this is flexible, and that it was based on the model that we have with the Ford Wyoming Center, which we see as a very successful private-public partnership. So again, I think I'm just gonna scroll through these pretty quickly. We've already had discussions related to the business plan. And I hope that we have addressed some of your questions and concerns there, knowing that we probably have a little bit more homework to do and may be able to come back tomorrow with some more definitive answers for you related to this. One thing that we did want to emphasize, though, is that in discussions with other shooting complexes, and admittedly, especially with Cameo, who honestly we did sort of try to some degree to model. We believe that labor resources will be really important and necessary to get the facility up and running, and also stabilized within that first 5-year period and successful into the long term. And so we do believe that it's important to emphasize that Casper has the ability to not only meet the paid and volunteer hour demands that a facility like this would bring, but also, and in the first 5 years of operation, but also beyond, because again, the University of Wyoming study identified some 400 jobs that could be created from a facility like this in our community. And so where are those workers going to come from? Well, in Casper, we have a more robust, because of our population base, a more robust pool of staff, whether paid or volunteer, that could work this facility and keep it running into the future. Again, just highlighting what we believe our in-kind contributions would be, and this is primarily, especially in the construction phase, this would be coming from commitments from primarily our local governments, City of Casper, Natrona County, potentially Converse County, Mills, Evansville, Bar None. We have gotten some verbal, again, commitments from industry in terms of, for instance, Wyoming Machinery to provide some equipment that could help us move earth a little bit faster. But we have operators, we have staff, we have expertise in order to move earth and build out a lot of the site components that are going to be required in terms of a shooting complex. But then again, we don't want to underscore the importance of that labor and the volunteer hours. And as I mentioned before, you know, Cameo indicated they use 60,000 hours of volunteer labor a year. I think that would be hard for any facility in Wyoming to come up with. So we conservatively estimated that closer to 25,000 hours in a year after we're fully developed. So that year 5 and beyond, we do believe that that is manageable based on volunteerism that we see in other areas where people in this community really rally around large events, such as CNFR and the state championships. So this just highlights where we have gotten written letters of support maybe not to the tune of some very specific financial asks, but certainly demonstrating the community and the area's willingness across municipal governments, across private industry, and then outside of our county to support this facility. And many of those letters did mention a willingness to offer in-kind or financial support, even if those dollar amounts have not been identified. So that covers, the viability and sustainability. Now we're going to get into the diversity, flexibility, and safety, which I hope will address, some of the site concerns that have been brought up. So the location that we're proposing is just north of Casper. It's a 2,000, excuse me, sorry about that. It's a 2,000 acre parcel. And we really believe that this location north of Casper, in the presence of the North Platte River, the Casper Mountain, abundant cultural heritage in the area, including the three major historic trails that run through our community, provide unique opportunities for education, recreation, and outreach. Further, the prior use of the property as a support site for energy production could provide opportunities for education around energy topics and reclamation.
Mr. Chairman, we'll click on the slide. So I'm assuming if you go back to your slide, the colors are the existing municipal boundaries. Is that correct? So this site has the municipal on two sides, correct? City of Casper.
Chairman, yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you. I
Yes.
just wanted to
Yes, the
clarify.
blue is City of Casper, green bar none, Mills is orange, and Evansville is pink, essentially. So as I mentioned previously, we did engage RDG Planning and Design. So they are a national consultant that we've been working with quite extensively since late last year on actually a Casper area Parks and Recreation Master Plan that covers a lot of Natrona County, Mills, Evansville, bar none, City of Casper, as well as partnerships with the school district and Visit Casper. And so this has been a very collaborative project, and we worked very closely with RDG Planning Design and developed quite a great relationship with that company through this process. Just so happens that RDG Planning and Design does have an arm that specializes in shooting complexes and public safety. And so we have consulted with them regarding this project, the feasibility, the site, and they feel like this is a strong site. This is a strong proposal. By the way, RDG was intimately involved in the development of the Cameo complex. And so, very positive preliminary review of the site by RDG Planning and Design. They feel like we could design a very safe, functional site that offers a number of different disciplines. The concept here was actually created by a local firm for us and really only demonstrates that various shooting disciplines can fit on the 2,000 acre site in a wide variety of configurations. So certainly this is not, what we envision in terms of a final design. It was just simply to try to show the area that we are proposing.
Okay, we're coming up on noon. We're scheduled to end at 12:30. We'd like to have some public comment time in there as well. So choose your remaining time wisely.
Yes, sir. I think we can finish up
Mr.
and
Chairman, I have a question if we may. So when you look at that site, there's 2,000 acres, but when I look at it on Google Earth, you got a lake out there, so obviously there's not going to be any trails or any activities, and then you have all that highly alkaline soil that's not suitable for putting much of anything on because it bogs down. So have you actually gone out with the consultants and mapped out what's the actual usable portion of that? Now, I understand you can shoot across the lake for long range, but that starts to limit others. So how much usable land is in that parcel?
Dr. Devine.
yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, we don't have an actual percentage for you because that will depend on the design. The lake is I don't want to use the wrong term for you. The lake is not a principal component of the land. It does not take a majority of that space. We do believe there would be some remediation with road base and to alleviate some of those concerns. But the vast majority, I would say at least 80 to 85% of that land is usable as a shooting range. But again, that will absolutely 100% be determined by the actual design, which we've been told from the beginning, the committee will hire a professional company to do. So we will try very hard to finish this up on time and allow everything to occur. I want to be sure to get back to the co-chair's question earlier. So we do talk about partner sites. No, and I apologize if we did not do a good job in explaining this in the proposal. These partner sites will not be in lieu of, they will be in addition to. So these are all partner sites that we already have in Casper and Natrona County and all functioning. The Stuckenoff Complex is our local all-around shooting range. You can see we have anywhere from 100-yard range to an 800-yard range. Law enforcement, military training opportunities. This is the site where we host the Wyoming Governor's Match. Again, we'll have about 200 competitors at this location here later on in July. This location also hosts NRL 22, some 3-gun steel challenge. So that's our local, and I'll wrap it up at the end. Senator Hickson, please keep me honest to make sure I respond to your question specifically. Casper Trap and Skeet, we have 88 throwers. You see, currently there's a 13 station sporting clay set up. We also have a sub-gauge sporting clay set up. I will say that the Casper Trap and Skeet just hosted this past weekend the state sporting clays tournament. That tournament was over 4 days, 97 registered shooters from 14 different states, 950 volunteer hours just on that particular shoot. Now, I do want to I want to be clear and open. That shoot rotates every year between Cody and Casper. So I want to make sure that I'm, full disclosure, Cody does a wonderful job at that shoot the year that we're not hosting it. So it's certainly not unique to us, but it is something that we do host. Then you have the Platte River Gun Club, one of the privates here in town, has a wonderful long range, has a train shooting. They're just, in fact, 2 weeks, they're going to have their inaugural Ultimate Hunter Challenge on that property. Natrona County Archery up on the mountain, a little different terrain. We also have the Casper Mountain Biathlon Club. And then we also threw in, not the only one, but we threw in one of the more significant private properties, Acres Precision, moved to town not too long ago. They're in the audience with us. They're developing a facility out in Alcova. So the idea for all of these is, again, not to be in place of, but in addition to. And the reason we believe that's significant. So for instance, if you want to have since we just talked about sporting clays, if you want to have a national sporting clays competition, that's fantastic. Set it up at the state shooting complex. We also have a facility in town that can host another tournament at the same time. So they can come in on Saturday and shoot 200 clays. They can on Sunday go to a different location 5 minutes away and shoot another 200. So again, it's meant to be in addition to, not in place of, because absolutely the ideas that you brought up would be nightmarish to try to do all the legal logistics on how you would do that.
I would also like to emphasize, Co-Chair, that with the exception of the Icarus property, these are all City of Casper or Natrona County owned property. So there would not be leasing necessarily, those are our properties to own and use. And so the management company would just coordinate with those properties to bring in complementary events.
And again, trying to be respectful of time and get us out of here right on the button. I do want to also add that at each of the locations, Stuckenoffs, Platte River, the Trap and Skeet, we do have shooters already. We do have people who already run tournaments. And so we have the expertise and the ability already in Casper to offer multiple of the events for multiple of the shooting sports.
So we won't spend a lot of time on this, but I do think it is worth highlighting, given that it appeared that one of your primary focuses was education. We have 3 facilities in our community, 2 being very adjacent to the site that we feel could be utilized to host educational experiences as well as entertainment and expos potentially, especially in terms of the Ford Wyoming Center. So when you start talking about those subsidy reducing strategies, bringing large expositions here that could be in the Ford Wyoming Center on the arena floor with ammunition and guns and all things shooter related in conjunction with a sporting event that's going on at the facility creates a lot of opportunity for us for both facilities, to be quite honest. And so we believe there's a lot of synergy there that would be difficult for other communities to be able to offer because they don't have an arena of this kind. And so we did want to emphasize that. In addition, I mentioned the Wyo Sports Ranch. This is the largest indoor sports complex in the region that we know of. It's slated to open in early 2025, and it is youth focused. So we believe that through this facility, we could really improve and enhance education for youth on firearm safety, hunter safety, get youth interested in safe shooting sports at this level. And so we're really excited about this, the synergy and the opportunities that this facility provides. In addition to that, we do have a locally and nationally recognized community college, which Dr. Devine has just recently retired from after 15 years of service, just 15 minutes away from the site. Casper College does offer degree programs in outdoor recreation, hospitality, and tourism management. And so again, we believe there's a lot of opportunity to partner to utilize that facility for education purposes and then complement their classroom education with on-site understanding of shooting sports, of how to operate or manage shooting facilities. All of those kinds of things create countless ways for us to partner with that educational institute.
For clarification, I was president for 9 years, although with COVID, it seemed like 15 or.
Sorry, Doctor.
Remember those days.
So through our
Senator
proposal.
Cole. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Yeah, just before we run out of time, I just wanted to ask something, and it was, frankly, I know you're strong in a lot of areas, and you have a good proposal is one that you came up with. My question is this: the site wow factor. I mean, what I guess is your answer to say, you scored low on that? What do you say mitigates that and makes that better than what it looked like on the scoring matrix? Thank
Sure.
you.
Dr. Devine.
You bet, Mr. Chair, Senator Cope, thank you for the question. I'm going to give you a quick answer and then Zanima is going to run through some points. The wow factor for our proposal is our proposal. We believe that we bring everything to the table that you're looking for, except perhaps if you want a wow factor on that site, we understand. We certainly understand, right? Do we believe that we are the strongest in the state? You know what? I'm not going to tell you that because I haven't poured through all the other proposals. I haven't spent the minutia doing that. Do I think we have a very strong location? Absolutely, I do. Having been to dozens and dozens and dozens of shooting complexes across the region, I would tell you that the wow factor on a shooting location is not what I'm looking for as a shooter. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in a good location, a good facility, and a well-run facility. So do we have a wow factor on the site? No, sir. We're not going to try to sell you a pig in a poke and say that we do. But we believe our proposal has everything you're looking for, and that's the wow factor. We believe that we hit more of these, we believe, than any other site you have. Now, having said that, we do believe there's some misunderstandings that is completely on us that we didn't draw out in our proposal that we would like to finish up with.
So in the interest of time, I think Dr. Devine really kind of covered, but the site is really where there seemed to be some concerns and some deficiencies in terms of the scoring. And so, one of the points that was made that is that the site is adjacent to city property on two sides. We do think it's important to note that there is property to the north that is available if we should desire to have it for potential expansion in the future. The original directive from this body, as we understood it, was 2,000 acres. And so that's what we sought. Given the opportunity, we could acquire more if that was the desire. While you all may see, an undesirable site, we see a clean slate with maximum flexibility. And we have talked to RDG at length about this. Having a site this size with complementary facilities that could handle some of the real terrain intensive shooting activities that we may want to also be part of, we believe just gives us maximum flexibility. As Darren indicated early, while we were trying to deal with the technology issues, the fiber optic internet to the site is becoming increasingly important. We're seeing it in youth sports, we're seeing it in shooting sports. So much of the scoring is being done via internet. And so in order for competitions to have that functionality, they need internet to the site, and we have that readily available. We also want to note that there are no noise concerns in our site. It is adjacent to a speedway with car racing. It's adjacent to two shooting facilities already. It's adjacent to a motocross facility. There will be no concerns from residents or anybody else in the area about the noise because they're used to it, quite frankly. We have no lead contamination concerns. We know that we will have to develop a lead control program, and we will do that. And it just so happens that we have a regional facility here in Casper and our solid waste facility that can take lead contaminated products. And so we will already have a way to mitigate any concerns when it comes to lead. It's not a critical wildlife corridor, as we have been told. The shooting complex will not degrade the surrounding landscape. As Dr. Devine indicated, does it have a wow factor? Is it beautiful? No, but that means tearing into the earth is not going to degrade the way that it looks. And the natural beauty of other areas around Casper that are within 5, 10, 15 minutes of this site will remain intact. And to address the location value, and again, we were guessing as to why our scores were low, not having details about the rubric and the certain criteria within each of those categories. We made some assumptions, but we do believe that our location has a lot of value, primarily because of the central location in Wyoming and the interstate access, which will readily draw driving competitors from throughout Wyoming and from throughout neighboring states. We believe that our location in central Wyoming means less leakage of our tourism dollars into those neighboring states. We have a track record of hosting very large events. We do it each year with 9 state championships, I believe 9. A lot of state championships. We do it with CNFR, which just celebrated its 25th year here in Casper, Wyoming. We did it with the 2017 Eclipse, which was an unprecedented event that brought tens of thousands of people to our community. And the only challenge we had was when the show was over, everybody was trying to get out of town at the same time, and there was a roadblock on I-25. But we cannot emphasize this enough in terms of the location. And I think Dr. Devine alluded to it a little bit earlier. The value of the location of this shooting complex will come primarily from the quality of the facility that we offer, the expert design of the scenarios and the courses for the competitors that are there, and the facility and the community's ability to host and support those large events.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cochran.
So real quick, and I think you alluded to it earlier, there is a realistic and most probable expectation that Casper is going to continue to grow. And so when I look at the site, you've got municipal boundaries on 2 sides, which means the city of Casper is going to grow. You've got private land to the north that could be subdivided tomorrow. And so I guess and this was in the proposal, said there's a reasonable expectation that this facility is not for today, it's for a long, long time. And so what protections have you had with the discussion with the city of Casper in the county and those private landowners around these facilities to maintain those buffers that may exist today, but there's no regulatory environment to stop it tomorrow. And so we're going to make a significant investment. And I say we, the state of Wyoming, the local governments and all, how are you going to protect that investment? And I guess that might be a question going forward. Maybe we don't need an answer right now. You can come back tomorrow and think about that. But I'll tell you going forward, when you look out 50 years and you look at the growth potential and things going on, this town is going to grow. And I think the committee needs some reassurances that a shooting complex today will be a shooting complex 50 years from now. And what are the protections that can be put in place to assure that we have those adequate buffers in place?
Dr. Devine, if you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Mr. Co-Chair, the reason I want to respond to that, that's an excellent question, although that's a little bit self-serving when you hear the next part of my response. I had the exact same question. When this started, one of the questions I had to Ms. Lopez was, Zelima, you know, I mean, we've got what we refer to as the halo, that earlier slide that you saw. We've got the halo effect going to be out here. Casper is still growing. And I was actually just talking about noise at that point. You know, I said, are we going to run into a noise problem, right? And well, I'll let you give her, I'll let her give you the response she gave to me, and then we can follow up tomorrow with a more detailed response.
Ms. Lopez.
Chairman, Darren, I think I did, at least to the noise concern, allude to that earlier in terms of the other adjacent land uses, in the area. And so, in addition, the city property that is owned adjacent will never be developed as residential or commercial property for a number of different reasons. We don't have commitments from the ownership to the north. But again, it's hard to ask for those commitments when we don't know if we're going to be the location for this site. So although we did go out on a limb and secure an option on this property so that you would know that we would have it for use if and when the time should come. So certainly we'll do some thinking and some research in terms of what future commitments we may be able to ask, or and be able to commit to in terms of a budget, of a business plan, of the land. I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to have much better answers for you in a short 24-hour period, but we were just trying to demonstrate the eagerness and the excitement for this project in our community, and the surrounding areas seem to be very supportive of the concept of having this facility here and making it a successful endeavor for our community and for the state of Wyoming.
1217, Ms. Legursky.
You've done a wonderful job, and we've talked about many, many, many things, but there still in my mind is the elephant in the room. And I'm wondering what RDG, if they looked at wind frequency and velocity. We've talked about noise, we've talked about development, but nobody's mentioned the wind, which of course does have an effect on shooting.
Does the wind blow in Casper, Dr. Devine?
I will say that the weather outside today is an anomaly, and I will leave it at that. Mr. Chair, Ms. Legursky, that's a great question. And I would say that I not to disagree with you, but I would say that only in certain shooting sports does the wind really become an issue. Certainly in long range shooting, it absolutely does. In 22s, I spent all of last week in Western Wyoming shooting prairie dogs. I probably shouldn't say that in a public meeting, but I did, primarily shooting at 22. And yeah, you learn to play the wind. So you're absolutely correct. In certain sports, that does become an issue. The very quick answer is no, that's not an issue that they've looked at yet, but certainly will have to be an issue looked at in final design. Absolutely.
All right. Ms. Lopez, how about you give us your, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe this is for the follow-up meeting tomorrow. Back to economic development, when we've talked primarily about like tourism, hospitality, sales tax. I'd just kind of be curious to know, you have a lot of people joining us today, or Dr. Devine or Ms. Lopez. This is opportunity to benefit the entire state. And really, when we talk about a world-class shooting complex, to stamp Wyoming as Second Amendment state. And there's no guarantees. Economic development can be a long play, but to grow the manufacturing cluster, the firearms, the supply chain, you know, and kind of like, what's the status of Casper in that realm now? And are you armed with people to see the opportunities, leverage things like SHOT Show and grow that industry?
Dr. Devine.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do apologize. That is the part that we pulled out. I had several comments I was going to make on that. We pulled them out on time constraints. We will make sure those get covered tomorrow for you.
All right. Here's your chance to wrap it up on a high note with the last few things you'd want the committee to hear before we take some brief public comment.
Nestled between Casper Mountain and the North Platte River, you'll find the heart of the mountain. With a bustling downtown centered around their outdoor haven, Casper is the ideal location for Wyoming's premier shooting complex, perfectly positioned to connect shooting enthusiasts with all that Wyoming has to offer. Paired with touchable history, a vibrant community, and unparalleled access to outdoor recreation, the Central Wyoming Shooting Complex has found its home in the one and only Casper, Wyoming.
Chairs, that was just a snippet into how we would leverage marketing and tourism in our community to bring people to a facility like this in Central Wyoming. So with that, we're happy to hear public comment.
Thank you so
And we
much.
thank you for your time.
You know, when we set this up, 2 hours seemed like a lot of time. Yeah.
It did to us as well.
So, for those in the audience who might want to offer some public comment, we do want to be respectful of the fact that we're in your hometown. But in fairness to the other applicants, we don't want to overload with, you know, a lot of hometown rah-rah. But we will take some public comment that's relevant to this presentation this morning.
Yes, and Mr. Chair, just let me finish up by saying again how we started. Natrona County is excited. We would love to be the home for this complex. We believe we would make the best home. However, we support Wyoming. We support this concept. Wherever the committee chooses to put it, Natrona County is behind it 100%. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's great to hear. We heard the same thing from some of the other applicants early in the process, and nice to know that there's broad-based support for this wherever it goes in Wyoming. So with that, we have about 7 minutes for some public comment. I see the folks from Icarus here. I see some other folks in the audience. Anybody wishing to make public comment this morning in support of this proposal? Or opposing this proposal, huh? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I try to go under the radar, but yes, I am Stephen Cathy, the mayor of Casper currently for this year. I am fully in support of this. You asked about bringing other industry here. As you noticed, Icarus is sitting right here behind us. They are coming here from out of state. They are wanting to develop and grow their business here in the county. Your questions and concerns about the weather. To me, personally, I do not do competition shooting, but I do hunt. And if you're going to hunt and be able to shoot 200, 300, 400 yards, you need to be able to read the wind. To me, if you're a shooter, you need to be able to read the wind. And that's one of the key things, is to be able to do that. And to be an ethical hunter, if you're going to take a shot at 450 yards at that bull elk, you better be able to read the wind, and you better be able to put him down with one shot. So from that standpoint, the level of people coming here should be capable of handling those types of things. I shot mine 2 years ago using a backpack as a rest with an old duplex sight at 450 yards. That's it. That to me is shooting. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. We appreciate you having these hearings here in the city as a representative of the city. Thank you for coming here to hold the hearings. We appreciate that. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Mayor.
Questions, comments?
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet.
Please introduce yourselves and tell us what you want to
Does
hear.
that thing work? I'm Travis Merklin, my wife Ashley Merklin. We own Icarus Precision. We're moving from Washington State to Wyoming for our manufacturing company. We're in firearms manufacturing, accessory manufacturing. And we're decided to move to this state because it seemed like the best possible state to move for 2A type stuff. It just made good sense. We looked at other states, but Wyoming came back to where this best spot. Picked Casper specifically because it has good town size, great infrastructure, and an international airport, good access to I-25. So it just made good sense for what we want to do. We work at very high levels with a lot of manufacturers, Sig Sauer, Staccato, Springfield Arms, Taurus Manufacturing, Agency Arms, Terran Tactical, and a few other I'm probably forgetting. And we purchased the property they were showing there because we want to basically use it for our own R&D testing of our products and development. A lot of our contacts right now are actually DoD, Department of Defense, Pentagon, agency, CIA, and a lot of tier one operators we work with for training and product development. And we wanted our own facility to develop those, prove out the concepts, R&D, destructive testing. The city of Casper mentioned it to us that they were trying to put in a submit for this proposal. And it seemed like it'd be a good thing for us to be able to help out with. So we haven't decided exactly in what capacity we can do that yet, but we're going to primarily focus on long range, very long range, carbine, pistol, and CQB training, more military style stuff. But that's what we're strong at. And we already have a whole crew of instructors that are coming on with us to help run our facility and help us do R&D and testing and probably training. So we feel like, again, like the mayor was saying, the wind in Casper is a little nutty, to put it mildly. From my limited experience, it's been pretty bad so far, but for long range shooting, that's a critical component. We work with a ton of special forces snipers. And as soon as I told them about, hey, we're looking at this facility, this property for these reasons for long range, I thought the wind might be kind of discouraging. They said, no, this is perfect, because in real world applications, we have to be able to work with this stuff.
Yeah.
Because in the mountains of Afghanistan, it ain't dead calm. I got to be able to take a shot a long way, and I want to train a lot of crappy situations for wind, weather.
So it actually becomes an asset for
Yes.
us rather than a deterrent. And we are really excited this is coming to the state of Wyoming. If it comes to Casper, we'd be even happier. You guys are looking for your commitment, regardless of whether or not this ends up in Casper. Icarus Precision will become a giant force right here in the city, in this state, and in this country. And so if there was also the world-class shooting facility here as well, then we can help propel that even further and actually make it a really successful endeavor for the entire state and the people of Wyoming.
Thank you. Travis, how large is the property that you're buying out by Alcoa?
It's comprised of 2 lots of 750 acres approximately. So the topography is amazing for long range shooting. We have some high elevations, some really deep ravines and that kind of stuff. So it makes it for real world scenario shooting excellent.
Yeah. And
In our
as far as
opinion.
the borders, it's bordered completely by BLM land.
And we currently have 15,000 square feet of manufacturing space here. We're going to require another 30 to 50,000 square feet of manufacturing capacity in
Next year.
Casper in the next 12 months or so. So we're growing at an exponential rate, which is a blessing and a curse both. But we're going to do it in this state, primarily in Casper. We have a satellite facility going in Cody as well. So we want to become an economic and manufacturing powerhouse in the state for firearms.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
And Commissioner North, we have about a minute and a half.
I've learned to be brief, so I will keep it that way. I'm a little biased, obviously, because I'm from Natrona County. However, you speak about the wind. I'm also the president of Flat River Rod and Gun Club, and we have competitions there throughout the year. And wind has never been one of the issues that has been brought up from the competitors as far as making it fair or anything like that. The other thing, we have a whole series of some of the top shooters in the world as far as F-class shooters. They go out there and they shoot on a regular basis when it is windy so that they can go other places and be able to shoot and be able to do it reliably. So they know what those drifts are going to be. They know everything else that they need to know. This location that we're looking at, I'm very familiar with it because I was also part of the Amoco reuse plan. And that was an area that I worked in a lot. Yeah, there's some things up there that needs to be modified, but we can address everything, every one of your concerns, including wind direction as far as where you're shooting, how you're shooting, and what the other areas are. This is also an area that can't be developed for a lot of other things because of its previous use. A rifle range or a long range shooting range is an ideal solution for this, to put that land into use and bring it back into productivity for not only the county, but for the state.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Commissioner. With that, we've reached the 12:30 ending time for this proposal. And like I said, 2 hours seemed like a lot of time 2 hours ago. So I'm sure the folks from Central Wyoming say the same thing. We do appreciate the tremendous amount of work that all of these finalists have put into their proposals. It's obvious that people care about this, that they share the excitement of the task force. And we're just delighted that your communities have put forth this effort. With that, we will pause for lunch. We will resume at 10 after 1, and at 1:15 we'll begin the presentations by Campbell County. We stand at ease.